A little bit at a time, but they've worked really hard on their presentation. So I'm just giving you an advance notice. Just smile at them. Because it's been...
Are we smiling now?
Smile. Yes.
We don't have to.
Official here says 585 and 38. So whatever that means, don't know. Doesn't matter.
He's just going to raise his hand, yes or no, thumbs up, thumbs
But I
down.
think I'm supposed to sign someplace.
Or should we do a voice vote?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Duh.
As long as there's a clear indication of which way he's voting. I mean, you can imagine what if someone...
So I'm just an ordinary member of the canvassing board here. Do I get a pay raise for that? Is there a stipend?
I don't know who that is.
Do I have to explain why he's over there? I don't think
No,
I do,
just say
because I
he's-
don't really want to do
Yeah.
that since,
You can just see.
You could say...
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
There, perfect.
Okay.
If you want
I don't know who that is.
dream is that you figure this out. So
Good, yeah.
But my printer is, it printed lousy, so I'll just bring those in.
we don't have to worry about
next day or
everyone can
two.
see everyone and hear
Right.
everyone, so...
Thank you. Do I pass these down?
Your opponent's never shown up for a meeting, Doug. It'd be nice if she showed up before she takes off. What do I know? Hello. Well, I think Kara left that for me, so I think it's Kara's pen. I'll just get one out of the drawer,
I saw that.
so that'll all
That's the
work.
way elections go sometimes.
There was an official stipend for that role, but there was not.
Harry?
Absolutely.
Which is worth something.
Looks the same.
Or maybe not.
Somebody, maybe you.
There you go.
Mayor.
Are you giving a report from Germany, or are you just going to listen?
I might
I better sign it. Here we
say
go.
something, but I don't have anything planned to say.
Yeah. I always like this. I
We
worked
all
for a
have
guy
to
at
sign this,
Department of
huh?
Commerce. And if you went on a trip,
Well, does everybody
you went to a
else?
I am the official conveyor now that Steve
You
is
are
no
the
longer sitting
conveyor
here.
of the
To the
documents.
agenda, 9F,
See, that's another, I'm the conveyor of documents.
And your signatures were,
public hearing
and you remember the
to just,
Okay,
Yep.
so that'll be under,
yeah,
trifecta this evening.
will that be under new
You're
business?
sensational.
yes,
So that'll be 9F.
yeah, 9F.
Okay. All right, it's 7 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Clerk will note those in attendance.
All will be noted.
Thank you. Would you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is approval of the minutes of the October 26, 2021 meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
I'll move approval, Madam Mayor.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Moving on to approval of the agenda, I believe, Ms. Heinecker, you have something you want to add under new business?
Yes, Mayor, members of the council. So on your dais was placed an item 9F. We would like to reschedule the public hearing for the issuance of our bonds to the December 14th meeting, and it has to do with publication deadlines. So please, under 9F, if we could add that.
Perfect, we will do that. With that, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to visitors and presentations. At this time, Samantha Crosby and Tracy Shimmick are here to talk about climate-smart municipalities. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. The city is fortunate to be one of 6 Minnesota cities participating in the Climate Smart Municipalities program. The program is an international exchange program where each city is assigned to a corresponding city in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. The city of White Bear Lake has been participating in this program, which is made possible through a grant from the federal German government and a partnership with the University of Minnesota since 2018. The program has provided the opportunity to make connections not only with our partner city Ludenscheid, but with other participating municipalities, various regional and state agencies, and even private companies. It has been a privilege to be part of such a strong delegation and to forge regional and business connections across the state and overseas. The goal of the program is the exchange of ideas and to partner on local actions in support of the global energy transition. This presentation is a brief overview of our 2021 trip. We are paying the costs of global climate change, and we will continue to pay them, but those costs will only continue to grow exponentially if we don't act now. This was the informal theme of this year's trip. It was just an idea that kept reoccurring in the conversations we were having throughout the week. The idea, not the cost of action, but the greater cost of inaction. We will all bear the cost of mitigating and recovering from natural disasters, and we bear it in ways such as insurance rate hikes and ever-rising energy costs. But viewed through a more optimistic lens, analysis has shown that clean energy brings high-paying jobs to Minnesota communities. Many major companies are already pivoting towards decarbonization, such as the Ford Motor Company making an $11 billion investment in electrical vehicle production and the refurbishment and recycling methods for EV batteries in an effort to put itself at the center of the electric vehicle revolution. A decarbonized economy is recognized as the path forward by a sizable number of both consumers and industry leaders. The wave of transition is coming, and we can either take advantage of the economic opportunity it provides, or we can get tossed around by that wave. The CSM program highlights ways in which we can support local solutions to mitigate greenhouse gases while also spurring economic growth at the same time.
While we were there, we were definitely drinking from a fire hose. It was a constant onslaught of information at all levels. Some of it was above my head, if I'm being honest, but I did learn a lot, and I think Sam learned a lot as well. We left with more takeaways than can be contained in probably a council meeting, let alone one presentation in a council meeting. But we're here to share some of those with you tonight. I think the main takeaways that we had is leaving with a sense of urgency, but also leaving with the hope that Sam referenced. The urgency is that cost of inaction, and we pay that cost. We're paying it both currently, and we're going to pay it in the future. We pay those both on an economic level and on a social level. So on an economic level, the cost of recovering from disasters and the frequency of natural disasters and extreme weather events that are occurring, and just the social costs of who's impacted. It's typically those who are on the lower end of economic means, and it's harder for them to recover. We also left with hope, because working in parallel with communities, not just in Minnesota, but across the globe, we're able to make change. It's not just one small community making this effort. Also, advances in technology make the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions much easier to accomplish. And there's, as Sam referenced, a lot of potential economic opportunities, not just for our own city, but that could be realized in our region. and that us as a city, as White Bear Lake, can play a leading role in advancing this change. And so I think it's easy for us to look at these natural disasters as they occur, as we look at hurricanes and things like that, and think that we're not being impacted at a local level, but really we're seeing the impacts of those change. The health impacts, I don't know if you guys noticed it this summer, but with the wildfires and the quality of air that we were experiencing down here, I run often. I had to cut back on my running. Not that that's the end of the world, but it is an impact that we're feeling. Water quality, I'm not able to bring my dogs to the dog park in late summer anymore because of the algae blooms and just concern over their health. One dog. We saw the drought and lawn watering issues that bring much consternation among neighbors, and even just recreation when we have the fluctuating lake levels, the impacts on fishing and swimming, Ramsey County Beach being closed for nearly a decade as an example of that. Also, we're seeing that in infrastructure costs. Our stormwater systems, and I am not a stormwater expert, but our stormwater systems were designed to handle 2-inch rainfall occurrences, which at the time were 100-year rainfall events. We're now experiencing 2-inch rainfall occurrences 10 times a year approximately. Also impacts to our urban forest and the cost of replacing trees. There's also economic impacts that we feel both at an organizational level, at a business level, and a personal level. The increased costs for heating and cooling as we experience more extreme heat and cold events. The local impacts we as Minnesotans are feeling for events that are happening across the country. I'm thinking about the natural gas surcharge that'll be on our energy bills for the next 18 months because of the failure of the energy grid and the natural gas cost surges that happened because of cold events in Texas. And even on a local level, the impact of the less predictable winter weather on event planning. It's harder to plan winter events when you don't know how long we'll have ice on the lake, if that ice is going to be thick enough to handle, ice fishing tournaments or barely open events or polar plunges. So, again, we were drinking from a water hose. This is just a small piece of what we learned. But what we saw Germany doing, that we saw them working on kind of across 3 different levels, both at the regulatory and policy level. And these stretched across government levels. Some of them were local actions, some of them were regional or state, some of them were federal, and I believe some of them were even EU, so on the transnational level. But carbon reduction mandates, climate action plans. Sam borrowed a copy from Ludenscheid, but they put this together, and as soon as one of us learns German, we'll be able to translate it for you. But I think it's even just looking at the breadth and scope of this document that represents a lot of work, and it was done through community engagement. They have stronger building efficiency regulations and mandate solar on every new building, environmental offset rules in their planning processes, meaning that whatever development, the environmental impacts of a development have to be offset with investments elsewhere. They also work very heavily in community engagement and outreach, and I won't read through all of this, but they work really hard at engaging their citizenry and their businesses and recognizing that this is a change that everybody needs to work on. It's not just done at the government level, but we all have a responsibility, or they all have a responsibility in acting to make changes. Also in investment, they're investing in energy efficiency in their municipal buildings, in public transit and walkability and bikeability improvements so people are less reliant just on individual car trips. They incentivize greenhouse gas reducing actions and investments. And they have a really, Munster has an innovative program that allows people to see the impact of their investment, where people are able to invest in a co-op based, or not a co-op, but they're able to invest in a project that installs solar on municipal buildings. And they earn, it's not a huge rate of return. Nobody's going to become a billionaire off of it, but they earn a risk-free rate of return, and it allows them to feel ownership in that change.
This is one example from Ludenscheid. It's a state-of-the-art production company, Evoline. They built their new facility with energy-efficient construction practices and with systems that capture the heat generated from manufacturing machines and the computer servers to warm the building. Consequently, the building has virtually zero need to draw from external energy sources. The founder of the company had the vision to spend more money up front on this self-sufficient design in order to ensure reduced operation costs over the life of the facility. This is an example of a public education and outreach. This postcard's barcodes shows temperature deviation from average for the city of Ludenscheid between 1881 and 2018. The gray shading shows the increase in CO2 concentrations during this time. This graphic can be replicated to reflect local data. So a carbon sink is something that absorbs carbon, such as a wetland or trees. If we measure the city's carbon sink and then measure our total citywide carbon footprint, we could determine where we stand. Having a starting point is an important place to be to know when you're trying to measure progress towards a goal. Cities such as Grand Marais, Red Wing, St. Louis Park, and other metro cities have all adopted greenhouse gas reduction goals. Planned unit development is a type of city land use approval where an exchange happens between the city and the developer. We flex some of our regulations in exchange for enhanced design in the project. The city could negotiate so that all design enhancements are sustainable initiatives. The City of St. Louis Park has green building policy that applies to all PUDs and whenever a project receives financial assistance from the city. During the winter months, the city of Warren took thermal images of the city to determine which buildings suffer from the greatest energy losses. This data helped them to determine where the greatest rate of return could be realized when applying loan and grant programs for energy efficiency improvements. The city of Maplewood has a program where neighborhoods compete against each other to reduce energy usage. 19 cities work with the Center for Energy and Environment to buy down the cost of a home energy squad visit for their businesses and residences. The city of Duluth is investing in building energy efficiency upgrades, and I should mention that we are doing the same for the city sports center. The city of Hopkins has installed electric vehicle charging stations for public use in their downtown, and many cities such as Maplewood have at least one staff member dedicated to sustainability efforts. These are just a few of the examples of what other communities are doing.
And what's our role? It's not to start cultivating mushrooms, as the slide might suggest, but this is actually a metaphor that the mayor of Munster put forth in one of his speeches to us. And he was talking about how residents will come up, particularly when they first started these initiatives, and say, what does it matter that we're doing this? We're just one small city. We're a city of 300,000 people. There's a whole world out there. How can we really make a change? And he told what he would tell residents is that it was like a mushroom. One might pop up in a field, and then another mushroom pops up in a field. And as more cities become mushrooms adopting actions to address climate change, it becomes a field of mushrooms. And that's when you start to see the change. And so when Sam and I sat back down and kind of processed everything we learned, what we came to is that there's really two spheres of impact that the city can have. And that is internally, where we address our own, institutionally as an organization, we address our climate impact and how we can mitigate that. And then externally, as a governing agency, how we can work with our community and surrounding communities and higher levels of government. And so externally, that can come through regulation, such as the PUD, the Green PUD initiatives, through educating residents about their impact and how they can mitigate their impact, residents and businesses, through incentivizing energy efficiency upgrades and other activities that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and by partnering across sectors and with our business community and residents and nonprofit organizations and with other government bodies to impact change.
In early 2020, the City Council approved a Level 1 action plan with broad objectives for sustainability. As a reminder, a hard copy of that plan was placed at your dais this evening. The Climate Smart Municipalities Steering Committee, which is comprised of representatives from White Bear Lake businesses, education, and nonprofit sectors, was put on hold in 2020 due to COVID. It will soon be reconvening to continue drafting a more detailed climate action plan. We have conducted an energy audit of all the municipal buildings and have entered into a contract to execute the improvements. We have also begun to purchase hybrid vehicles in various departments such as building, police, and fire. The city is tracking the energy use in public buildings, and we have been participating in Arbor Day for over 30 years. In conjunction with Ramsey County, a food scrap dumpster was installed at the Public Works facility. Our many outreach efforts include the Solar Power Hour, the newsletter sustainability features, and the Environmental Resource Expo during the last week of Market Fest. Finally, we are currently working on completing Green Steps Level 5.
And so, looking forward, there's some more immediate actions we think the city could consider adopting in order to address climate change. The first would be to adopt a climate policy lens, which really means that we're evaluating all the city's activities, the programs, projects, et cetera, from the perspective of their impact on climate change and doing what we can to mitigate those impacts and lessen them. We can continue working with the businesses through the Climate Smart Municipality Steering Committee, but also forging new relationships in the business community to help bring ideas and ways and financing, information about financing these types of projects so that businesses can start reducing their impact if they haven't already started. Another idea is, and we can also use our own energy reduction efforts and projects to be examples to show best practices to our local community. Another idea that is happening in Duluth to a certain extent, although I couldn't explain the exact details right now, but also Ludenscheid is doing, is to use the cost savings from their energy efficiency projects to reinvest in a fund that's then used to invest in additional energy efficiency projects, but also to provide incentives to local residents in the business community to invest in their own. At the planning department level, we can look at reviewing our land use and building codes to find opportunities to improve sustainability measures in local development projects in the built environment. In the near term, again, we plan to publicize and promote the city's facility energy audit results in the next newsletter so that people can see us as an example. We'll be reconvening the Climate Smart Municipalities Steering Committee to complete the climate action plan, and then we will be bringing that to council for your review and hopefully adoption. Circling back, in conclusion, we're ending up back at where we started, the cost of inaction. On the trip, this hit me particularly hard as a parent. While I know the impacts of climate change will affect my way of life, I fear that it will make it impossible for my own child to enjoy the same quality of life I have. It is a reminder of an oft-used quote: "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, but rather we are borrowing it from our children." Truly, we are grateful to have had the opportunity to participate in the program. We learned a lot. I hope that shows through this presentation. And we learned about how we can make change in our own individual roles in the organization. There's so much more we could have reported back on, but I don't think you want to hear just us talking tonight, so we've tried to be concise and distill it down to a few points. But we are here in part to remind also that the city has members of staff that are enthusiastic to continue and expand upon the work the city is already doing. And we have the technical expertise and capacity to execute additional measures to meet the goals that the council sets forth in this matter. In addition to ourselves, council members Bean and Edberg also participated in the program, and they may have other insights that they would like to share with you tonight.
Thank you. Members, anything you'd like to add? Councilmember Bean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The presentation was extremely good. I thank you very much for the concise and informative presentation. One of the things I remember from the very first, so I've had the opportunity to go to Germany twice. The first time, one of the things I remember most is Senator David Senjum and his saying, "You can lead, you can follow, or you get out of the way. If you follow, you lose." And we don't want to lose. We have to lead in order so that we can stay ahead. We don't want to be the ones that are losing in this race. And leading, it doesn't mean that we're going to be spending a ton of cities' money, but we need to put some of the city's focus on this. Some of the ideas that you brought forward as far as what the city could do. Not a whole lot of there might be time involved, but not a whole lot of cost. A lot of cost savings. I mean, I've got friends that, believe it or not, think that, well, if the city requires you to put a charging station in your house, it's going to cost $10,000. I put a charging station in my house. It would have been half the cost if I would have done it when I built the house. It was $1,000. It would have cost $500 to do it when I built it. Let's, do that. A requirement like that doesn't cost $10,000. It saves hundreds, and it makes it easier. And then there's also the investment return. The sooner you start this, the sooner you start seeing the return on the investment. That's like the mushrooms, and that's like your family or investment advisor was telling you, the sooner you invest, the sooner your returns become self-replicating, and you have to put less into it because what you've already invested is producing those returns. We want to produce those returns. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Edberg.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we live in a society that is not entirely aligned, but I think the leading sources of information and knowledge are aligned, that we face massive changes in our climate, and these are showing up in places around that we see in our everyday lives. Simple things. When I was growing up, we never saw possum as roadkill. Why do we see them now? They're migrating north because our climate has changed, and they're responding to a more amenable climate for their use. When I started growing commercial blueberries 45 years ago, I couldn't grow some of the varieties that I grow today. And it's because our climate has changed. This isn't just weather, this is climate. And there's all kinds of our everyday examples that I think we can all look at. I appreciated the mention about our city infrastructure and the capacity to handle 2-inch rains. That being a 1 in 100 year event, and now we're seeing them annually, multiple times. It's like it's all around us. The planet is screaming to us if we but care to take a look and take note. Now, that doesn't mean that all things are doable in the short term or in the medium term. I think it means sober thought and consideration is required. And so let's pick the places where we have opportunities, where we have energy, where we have local advantages that allow us to advance things that make sense for us. So in this council chambers, last month, we had representatives of a local company who has a major division located in our city limits, and they do this professionally. And they have been engaged with us and with a whole bunch of other folks to say what makes sense for you in a whole bunch of individual situations. Those folks get paid in the real world because they know some things about how to make this transition. For those who might be thinking that government-y types are driving this conversation, I particularly appreciated the conversation about how real-world companies are investing billions of dollars because they see the handwriting on the wall. One of the things that was very clear, Germany is a car nation, whether it's BMW or Volvo, anyway, you got it, Mercedes. Every major German manufacturer is coming out with lines and planning to convert their lines to electric vehicles. We are seeing the same thing in the United States. They are responding to markets, they are responding to people who are paying cash, and they're making changes. So for those of us who look to the market for validation, I guess we could subscribe to Elon Musk's Twitter and find out what's the market value of Tesla these days. Anyway, the point is, we have lots of stuff going on. We need sober thought. Let's pick our places and let's be intentional and not hide our head in the sands. I valued the opportunity to learn from colleagues in Germany, and I valued as much the connections that we have made here in our own community and in our own state for how Minnesota might play a role in that conversation.
Thank you. No, I have to say, I hope this project will continue because I do believe that it's very important for our future, for the city, for the people in the city. So I hope it will continue, and the task force is a good group of people that have come together to work on potential solutions and things we can do. So Ms. Heinecker and I went on the last trip to Germany, and I believe they're coming in February. So you will have visitors from Germany in February. So thank you both for presenting this tonight. It was very informing. Moving on to item 5. Public hearing in consideration of a proposed right-of-way vacation. Ms. Kane.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The current county records reflect a recording error with regards to Fifth Avenue right-of-way and vacation. 2 resolutions were presented to the City Council back in 1977. The first request was to vacate Fifth Avenue right-of-way between the south side of Highway 96 to the north side of Clarence Street. We'll call that Vacation A, highlighted in blue on the aerial map behind me. The second resolution was to vacate Fifth Avenue right-of-way between the north side of Clarence, south to the north side of Whitaker Street. We'll call that Vacation B, highlighted in red on the exhibit behind me. The second vacation request was never approved by the City Council. Only Vacation A was adopted. However, Vacation B resolution was accidentally filed with the county that same month. The error was realized fairly quickly, and an affidavit by the city attorney at that time was soon recorded to nullify and revoke the misfiled resolution. And then at that time, Vacation A, shown here in blue, was recorded with Ramsey County. And this correction has been evident in the city's maps for many years. I'll just walk you through some of those from left to right here. In 2001, you can see that the Fifth Avenue right-of-way was still shown from the north edge of Clarence Street to the south. In 2003, again, it's shown. The right-of-way is shown as white, and then I don't know if that green public use or designation of the wetland creeped into it, but you can still see the right-of-way in 2003, as well as on the 2011 map, and again on a utility plan from the engineering department as recently as 2014. Somehow staff believes somewhere in between 2014 and 2017, Vacation B was somehow recreated by Ramsey County and started to reflect on the maps, but still without City Council approval of that vacation. And it's our position that the county data has remained incorrect since that time. Tonight, we are conducting a public hearing, which has been published in the paper and notice sent to all property owners within the Ramaley plat between 5th and 4th Avenues south of 96 to Whitaker. And so staff is requesting that the City Council conduct the public hearing this evening, take testimony from those notified residents, and then continue the case until the December 14th meeting to allow additional time for the city attorney to conduct legal research into the matter. As noted, it is a complicated history to understand all the documentation and how this error was recreated. And we would like to be able to the best of our ability, provide that information to the council and to the residents of this neighborhood as to this vacation. So that really summarizes my introductory comments, and be happy to answer any questions the council might have before the public hearing or afterwards.
Thank you. Council, any questions at this time for Ms. King? If not, I will open it up for the public hearing. I would like to remind everybody that we are here just to talk about the vacation. That's it, nothing else. So please try to address your comments to that piece. I see I have about 4 people that have signed up to speak. If you want to, I can either call you out by name, or if you want to come up and just give me your name, whatever works. So at this time, the public hearing is open. Sure.
Last time.
I need your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Samita. I live at 1801 Clarence Street. I am, last time I was here was the Planning Commission 2 weeks ago, and I was last to go, and they made it a point to say, don't repeat yourself or repeat the people before you, so everything I wanted to say was taken away, so
that's why you're first.
So I actually am here to offer a proposal solution to the issue at hand. Obviously, legality speaking, the jurisdiction reaches far beyond this bench here, right? Fair to say. So there's a couple things that I wish to do. I'm going to establish a timeline. I'm going to clear up some misinformation, and then perhaps offer the solution, and then some other notes I might have. So I want to make note of June 14th, because 2021 and June 14th, 1977, those are 2 dates that play a role in this situation. In June 14th, the request to vacate A and B, as described by the city previously, was heard and decided upon. A was passed, and rightly so. B, it says here that the abutting property owners had not signed the petition as required by ordinance. Well, I went ahead and got all of the signatures of the abutting property holders, including others in the neighborhood, after explaining the situation. So I have that. Now, here's my thing. There's meetings every 2 weeks, correct? The accident, I'm going to call it the great whoopsie of 1977, when B was accidentally submitted, was the day before the next meeting would have occurred, which means if this had been submitted at that meeting, what would the result have been? So sit on that. Moving on. That opportunity was never presented because there was a mistake made. And as far as I'm concerned, everything else that happened after that is irrelevant, because according to the initial intent, it was to, a public hearing has been discussed. It appears to be in the public interest to vacate. And why would that be? Can we put that photo back up of the land plot of the whole? Nope, those are just pictures. Okay, right here. When you look at this, can I go over here? When you look at this, what do you see in all of this right here? And then this, what do you see? I see a buffer, which is exactly what they were just talking about in the meeting, in the segment before. So we have natural habitat occurring, and they want to take it away. Okay, we'll leave that at that. So in 1977, they found it was in the public's interest to vacate it. But there was an accident that occurred, and they never got the opportunity to see it through. What the city's trying to do, and is pushing really hard, which I don't understand because they're supposed to be on, they remain neutral, but it appears as though So this is where 2021 comes in, June 14th. Rose Tice passes away. Ironically, on the same date, June 14th, she passes away. A couple months later, 2 weeks ago, we're before you, another panel discussing overproducing. In fact, the panel said, this is ugly, it's too much, it doesn't fit the neighborhood. But they were waiting to see the outcome of this before they made a decision on that, even though they said, no, that's too much, and which it was. And according to the Tice brothers, they were hoping to get $450,000 per unit, times 8, divided in half, because you figure materials is 1.8 per brother. Now, the family that lives there is the grandson and the great-grandkids. They have chickens, they have 3 kids. Essentially, Uncle Tice wants to push the family to a little tiny, right, so that he can overdevelop this and then split the inheritance between his brothers. So they are using this as a free pass at a loophole that was created on a whoopsie, so they can overdevelop that, and who knows what else. What's the bigger picture here? Why does the city want access there? What else do they want to do? Conflict of interest. Last meeting, as I'm walking in, I overheard Tice Construction making plans to meet with a city representative for coffee the next morning. 11:30 that next morning, I'm alerted by my dogs letting me know there's someone in the yard. It's Tice Construction truck. Switching out the City of White Bear signs for this meeting and the last meeting. Now, why is the construction company representative doing the city's job? Conflict of interest, in my opinion. Well, is there a commission if this gets passed through? Is there some sort of monetary exchange? I mean, these are questions I think that should be questioned. Because if it smells funny, it looks funny, it probably is. And the lack of support that the city has for this, I mean, they're creating a narrative that doesn't even align with the data, with the information on the records. Okay, they keep saying it was denied. Another accusation is that it was denied in July of 1977. And actually, if you read the meeting notes from July 12th of 1977, so tell me this. Let me actually hang on. July 12th, 1977, resolution vacating right-of-way for City Street, 5th Avenue from North right-of-way from Clarence to the south of Whitaker. No action was taken, denied. Next, resolution vacating right-of-way for City Street, Hinckley, from 4th to 5th. So they said, we want a street here to here and here to here, and the city council said no. This was a month after June 14th. So June 14th, vacate A and B, A passes, B needs more signature. Whoopsie happens, next meeting, no idea what happened. Next meeting, they try to push a street through. Council said no. A month goes by. August 30th, affidavits written and signed, notarized. August 30th, vacation A is finally entered into record. The 31st, the affidavit is created and notarized. The 31st is then, the 1st of September is then entered into record. So, in my opinion, and this is just me, I see this was a loophole that was created to retain ownership because perhaps I knew Rose. I met her. Rose was very, very adamant about her property markers. My property markers. That yard was to be for her grandkids. She was concerned about my dogs crossing the lines and interfering with her grandkids, and I assured her we have invisible fences, fine. And it was. If she knew what was happening, she would roll in her grave because I know how much she loved that yard and how much she wanted it for her grandkids. I'm trying to segue back on track here. So without getting too much more into this, I think you guys get a pretty big picture. I believe the original intent was in the interest of the public to vacate. They needed the signatures. Well, they didn't have them then because, well, 1977, what was happening then? I was being born in August. My house was being built. So they probably had a hard time getting signatures because they didn't have email, they didn't have cell phones, they had to snail mail it. So it's like, well, let's send them an email or write them a letter, and we'll see if they come back to the next meeting. They were never given that opportunity. So I present it to you today will you please accept it and vacate this? You literally have to do nothing. It already legally says everybody who owns it. You just have to vacate it officially from 1977, correct that error first, because that was the first error, and then everybody's happy except for them, which is fine. Because the people that live in the community matter more. Thank you.
All right, who would like to speak next?
I just want to muddy the water.
Come to the microphone and state your name and address, sir.
This is my title, my property title.
I need your name and address for the record, sir.
Patrick Kenny, 1800 Park Street.
Thank you.
And it very clearly shows right there, Fifth Street being vacated and those portions of that land being annexed to my property. This document is from 1994. And the original document was apparently 1997. Then there was a document shortly after that going to the county to say that was an error. Well, the county in 1994 recognized that vacation. I'm sure everybody along there has the same thing. So there's a big muddled up mess with the paperwork that's gone through.
Thank you.
I just want you to be aware of this.
Thank you so much. Who wants to speak next?
My name is Paul Rody, and I live at 1823 Park Street. And I've been there for 40-some years, about 44 or something like that. And I've known, like, when this went through, Neil Charter, Brian Mann, his father, and Louis Markle, I've known him for all this time, too. They went to the thing, and they were notified that this was vacated. So they went, they paid their money, they paid the fees, they got the paperwork all done, and they've paid taxes on that since 1977. So how can you say now that you're taking back something that you sold in 1977? How can you sell something and then 2 months later decide, oh, we made a mistake? Well, we make mistakes in our life, and we have to live with them. How can you do this to these people? They've been paying taxes on this for 44 years. Now you come and you say you're going to give them back the property they own, but you're going to keep part of it, where the streets were. I could see that was a real bad mistake to vacate the right-of-way for Park Street and for Clarence, because it cuts out a block. It's hard to get to. But it's not landlocked. People say it's landlocked. No, it's not. White Bear Township has Dillon Street that's been undeveloped, it says. But if they were to put that street back through, they'd have right away through to the side. But I know you guys don't work very well with White Bear Township. But that's what I've heard. But the county would also say they need the right of way at Park to get through to do the work on the holding pond there. Well, they've never been stopped for doing work on the holding pond. The only thing that they did there is one time when they went through, they left a pile of rocks sitting there. The city came out, hit the pile of rocks with their snowplow, and then they wouldn't plow us out for the rest of the winter. We got plowed out one time. We went to the city and we said, what's going on? They said, well, the contractor's supposed to plow you out now. I said, who do I pay taxes to get plowed out for? So you talk, and then they wanted to have the snow at the end of Park Street pushed out into the city's lot that's there on the thing right there. And the city said, no, we cannot do it because you got to go across private property. Well, the only private property they could have been talking about was the man's property and Pat's. So you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. That sometimes you say you own it, and now how can you take it back? Just, I just don't get it. And I haven't heard any offer of money for all the tax money they paid in, or even for this right away, for the street for Park and Clarence. If they want to build there, but I mean, they still have to offer something back. These people own it. I cannot see how you can take back something we've already sold. I really can't. It really irritates me because I'm all about precedence. And if you can do this to these after 44 years, what the heck are you going to do to me next? And I see the other thing that I would like, it has nothing to do with this, but I do see where they could, if you talk to the county and to White Bear Township, they could put that Dillon through for 2 blocks, and that would give them a hell of a lot more parking for that park there too. And when they have big soccer tournaments and stuff there, they come and they park on Park Street there, both sides, and you can't even get an emergency vehicle through. So for us, it would make a hell of a lot of sense where they had the parking over there. I'm going to get out of here before I get, but I mean, it irritates me after 44 years how you can come back and say, oh, we made a mistake. Well, we all make mistakes, and we have to live with them.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hi. Karen Doyle, 1801 Clarence. I'm not going to be up here super long, but I had a dry mouth last time, so I brought my water. I forgot to hit print on my computer for my little notes and speech today, so luckily Google Docs are on your phone, and that's what I'm going to use here really quick. Like I said, 1801 Clarence is my, of course it's not going to come up now. Uh-oh. I don't know why this one worked. Bear with me one second. All right. I live at 1801 Clarence, which is the first house to the east of the Tice property. You can see it up there, basically right where the blue Vacation A ends. So on the north side of Clarence to the east of Tice property. I'm standing here again for the second time in 2 weeks. First 2 times in my whole life I will probably have to do this. I'm not super experienced in this. So October 25th, we were here for the Planning Commission meeting, and I know they said this is just for the Vacation Avenue issue. The other meeting was just for the Planning Commission and the proposal of the development, but these are intertwined, and I got to speak a little on the vacation issue when I was at the October 25th meeting, so I feel like if it's a little intertwined in here, bear with me, because to me it's all one huge mess. A little bit about me. I spent almost 20 years in the fire service, 14 of those years with St. Paul Fire. I have 4 hours off of work tonight. I'm going to go back to my shift right after this. It's 10 hours I already did. I'll do another 10 later tonight. When I do that kind of work, I looked for a home that would keep me calm in my home life. So I was looking for something in a quiet area, near nature, had a calming sense to it. It was at the end of a dead-end street. It was private. On the MLS description of my home, it reads, gorgeous home that has been wonderfully updated, nestled amongst mature trees at the end of the street, really gives you a sense of privacy and peace. That's what I bought into. That's what I thought I had until this summer. This is my property lines that was researched during my title work. 2 pages of that. I had a shed built, and I had it approved by the city. The city gal that came to approve it walked the property lines with me and said, make sure you know you own this section, because if the city ever tries to come through here, you own this. She told me that. She printed off this sheet for me. Ramsey County's sheet, same dimensions, same things. I will leave you guys a copy of all that for your records up here. I will leave you a letter from a neighbor who could not come tonight for work conflict. There was 2 more neighbors on our street that could not come tonight. They were out of town. They were here at the Planning Commission meeting. So there's been a lot of concerns over all of this and what it would entail if it were to happen. So buying my house, I trusted the documents, I trusted the title process, I trusted everything about it to purchase what I purchased. the MLS, like I said, the land surveys, the city inspector, the physical site, the lot lines. I base my purchase and the purchase price off of what I saw at that time and what I see today. I don't feel like it's fair to take that all away after there's an issue with an error from 44 years ago in 1977. This is a long time ago. I was in diapers then. I was born, but I was in diapers. This is a long time ago to have come up now. And you hear from others that they've thought that they've owned this the whole time because they've been told that numerous ways and times. And now all of a sudden, one family member of one household or one family member of that family wants to develop this. The other ones, from what I'm told, do not want to see this develop. They want the grandson to have the property and to have it for themselves. They have 2 purchase agreements, from what I'm told, in limbo, trying to figure out which one they go with. Just the house, and they're going to lose more of their backyard, which is already pretty minimal, or they're going to buy all of it. So that's where we're sitting. The amount of time and stress and money that I have had to put into this is enormous. I had to seek legal advice with an attorney, and there's thousands of dollars in that. I didn't sign up for that when I purchased this property and what I understood I had. And it's just being taken away to develop that land. So I talked about the family and how one wants to develop this. They want to cram in 8 dwelling units, and they call it 4 duplexes, but it's 8 dwelling units. If you think 8 dwelling units, 2 people that drive per unit, that's 16 cars. These proposed developments are single-car garages, single driveways. There's not a lot of parking. That was an issue for the Planning Commission. They were just like, where are they all going to park? Tons of issues with this. The units are 10 feet apart, 10 feet off the property line. They're going to take my natural tree line out per the plans to just butt this right up next to my house. I'm going to stare out. Instead of looking out into the park area and trees and see the sunset, I will look out and see someone's kitchen window. Again, not what I signed up for, not what I purchased here. So like I said, the proposed plan on the 25th, there was 4 members here. What they came out of that meeting with thoughts were it was too much. It didn't fit the area. They didn't want to. One of them was like, we don't want to build another township parking lot. Putting a cul-de-sac in would give them another parking lot, which already fills up now. Like I said, 1-car garages, cul-de-sac. They think they're going to be empty nesters that buy these places. They don't know who's going to buy. They can't say it's going to be an empty nester. Our street is 22 feet wide, no curb, no gutter. It's narrow. At the Planning Commission, the bus driver, one of the members substitute bus drives, and he was like, this is not safe for these children. I'm here. I drive these streets with the bus. There's one way in and out. They don't want to use Dillon Street. They want to just come in off Clarence, and that's the only way in and out of there. It's already hard enough getting out onto 96 and turning to go to the west. It's really tough. Like I said, the grandson bought the house. They want to have it for themselves. It's like a conflict between the family, and I know that's not the City Council or Planning Commission's issue. I know that. Like I said, they said it was too much. The neighborhood will be the one that feels the ultimate blunt change in this, in all the traffic and whatnot. They're going to take down all the trees. So before this, we're talking about nature and trees and all sorts of things, and it's like they're just going to take all them trees down, put up buildings, asphalt cul-de-sac, asphalt driveways, 4 buildings, 10 feet apart. Just stuff them in like sardines. That's what it feels like, and that's kind of what it feels like for all of us. And they said it was green. I don't know how green that seems. It seems greedy to me, as we talked about some of the money they're trying to make out of this. So in a letter that I received from the city dated September 22nd, it was talking about Rose Park View Addition, the proposal. It had the the project plans, what they will look like. It had this map that they kind of have up there. It's got a few more things on it. On this map, they say they want to access Clarence Street, Park Street, Hinckley Street. In this resolution that's not numbered yet, but is written up for, I'm assuming, this meeting here, toward the bottom it says, whereas the City Council desires to preserve the portions of Fifth Avenue at the end of Clarence, Park, and Whitaker. There's an error. Nothing lines up with any of this. Flip the page, it says in 1997. What's going on in 1997? That doesn't make sense. Let me scroll down my notes here. One of the Tice brothers walked out to my neighbor and I in June and said, your property values are going to decrease. You might as well sell now. I mean, that's what he told us. And I mentioned that to city staff, and I was laughed at and said, no, they didn't say that. And I said, yes, they did. And they said, that's like walking outside and shooting yourself in the foot. Like, they knew that that was probably what's going to happen. I didn't pay over market value for a home to be next to a bunch of duplexes a couple years later. Two different times on memorandums, it says, there is one for today's meeting, and then there's one from the 18th of August. And back in the summer, I was told I'd be kept in the loop on all this, and I'm kind of skipping around here, but September 1st, I read about the vacation issue in the newspaper, not kept in the loop, not mentioned at all. In that memorandum for that time frame in August, it said, where is it here? It said sometime in the last 10 to 15 years, they think that the issue is recreated. And then for the memorandum for today's meeting, they say somewhere between 2014 and 2017. So many errors in so much that seems to start from the 70s and just keeps compounding through to today. Like I said, I was not kept in the loop like I said I would be. I emailed the city on September 15th. Didn't hear anything back until I received this in the mail. This was dated the 22nd of September. I work 24-hour shifts. I don't get the mail every day when I'm not home. So the next time I got the mail, I had also received a phone call from city staff. So there was multiple days and times to send me an email, call me by phone, say you received my emails with all my questions, but that was not presented that way. It was just mailed out to me. So again, not kept in the loop. I was asked one time, what will it take? You have 30 feet by 30 feet that's yours, and we all have that much, but together it's 60 by 30, and it's not the size of the area, it's what that opens up into, what happens if that's opened up to. I was asked, what do you need? What will it take? 30 by 30 is 900 square feet. You need that much back in taxes, and that's not the case. It's not, I'm not looking for that kind of reward for this. I know it was talked about at the council meeting in August. It was discussed. Maybe I don't need to know about that, but again, like that was kind of like not kept in the loop on something that I'm assuming that I owned. Ramsey County, I've talked to them. They said this is a legal issue. It's going to be hashed out legally. The city staff writes that they expressed doubt in leaving a mistake in place. And you can see that it's dated back many, many years of where this mistake is. And suddenly it wants to be changed and fixed. I know at the Planning Commission, they talked about the dump and contamination in that ground area. The water issue in there, they have there's a lot of water stuff going on over there. Number of years, there was a fire in the ground that burned for days I mean, that hasn't been searched or talked about or discussed in any way. Almost done here. So I had, like I said, I had to get an attorney involved. This is his letter, and I'm sure you guys have seen that. And obviously from his take, I agree with what he says. Today, this afternoon, during my shift at work, I find an email that he sent me with the city attorney's letter. Again, two different things, two different sides. They outline a bunch of records and documents and numbers, and you can go back to Nicole's speech and put things together and see what's missing and what's not. I guess that's the gist of my concerns here. It's not what I signed up for. It's not what I assumed would be developing down the road, with all the information, the paperwork, the title stuff, the lot lines over and over. All that stuff is not true anymore if this is what we're taking. And if we are trying to vacate a street to put in 4 duplexes, which was already presented, putting the cart before the horse kind of thing they've talked about, that was done in October, and it was not voted no, but it was voted to continue because they didn't have this information to say, what do we do with this situation? But they all agreed that that was way too much for that area. One of the gals grew up in the area. She doesn't fit the area. Numerous reasons, like I discussed in here. So I think that's all I have. I don't need to take more water. I'll just drink it at my table there. But can I give you these? I just have one copy of something, so. Any questions? I've seen it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, who's next?
Good evening. I'm Melinda Monigold. I live at 1819 Park Street. I can't help but wonder why this has come to be an issue now. Our part of the Ramaley Park Edition has been living apparently in blissful ignorance for 44 years. We haven't had a problem with it. We've been nice and content over there. Personally, my husband and I have been living in blissful ignorance for 32 years over there. We live on a dead-end street. Our streets are narrow, as mentioned. We do have a wealth of wildlife. Some of it we don't want so much right now because we have a family of coyotes that have moved in. But we have turkey and deer, and it's a very quiet area. So why all of a sudden does this need to be vacated? I don't think anybody has any idea what's underneath that area, the dump, how soggy the land is. You look at that part at the bottom between Park Street and Hinckley, and it's wetlands. It's soggy and it's boggy. You could not put a road in there without building up a lot of that. And I'm not even sure you have room next to the pond to do that. They put in that retaining pond a few years ago. My husband and I also were at the Planning Commission meeting. We did hear from the representative from Tice Construction that they had asked Ramsey County to access the back property from Highway 96, and they were told they could not do that. So the only way they can get into that property is from Clarence Street. Again, our roads are narrow. We have a lot of children in the area. We thankfully don't have much traffic over there except when there are activities in the park. I would tell you that our snow plowing has been abysmal for 32 years. We're usually the last ones plowed, and believe me, some days we don't get plowed at all. And sometimes we have 2 or 3 snowfalls before we even get plowed over there. Again, I would just like to know why this is an issue now. Why have we been happily ignorant for 44 years, and why does this have to come up now? What's changed that we can't stay blissfully ignorant over there? Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
So, my name's Nathan Friend. I live 1815 Clarence, is actually next to Karen Nicole. Interesting neighborhood on property lines. I had my land surveyed because I put a fence up. Everybody's like, well, it was wrong. But I'm like, well, I went off my plot. So I said, screw it. I'm gonna pay surveyor. At that time, I ran a landscape business. I run a concrete business. That's gonna roll into here in a minute. He goes, I spent an extra hour. He goes, I couldn't figure out these pins. I mean, everybody that's been in construction, around construction, knows those things get hit, buried, disappear, aliens pull them out of the ground, whatever happens. He ended up finding them, but he couldn't go naturally, let's go to the neighbor, pull pins. He had to end up going all the way to the corner house, I can't remember the street or the house number, but the one, Clarence and 4th. And back way, he charged me extra $150 for overage, he's like $500, couple hours, we'll drop every pin, he couldn't find them. Then he emailed us, I don't have the emails anymore because that went with my landscape business, closed it, got rid of it. Sad story. And he goes, after I looked at it, he goes, that land actually jetted as a corner. It was never staked properly, but he goes, that is owned by that house. He goes, that's why it took the extra hour and a half. Because I'm like, why am I paying an extra $150? I don't get it. Everybody would question that, right? So just every time you pull a survey, it's weird. And when Ramsey County, I look at it, you got the main government, then you got the state governments, then you got the county governments, then it's us, peons in White Bear that we try to keep everything going. Well, why is Ramsey County saying one thing when it's our mother, if you look at it that way, saying, hey, this is the way it's supposed to be? Survey and all that stuff. Here's my piece about this development. Well, actually, backtrack. So I pulled in the neighborhood. I came off a job early for once in my life. Spent 10 minutes at home. And I seen the surveyor guy, and I'm like, hey, it's kind of going on. This is before I was in the loop. He goes, it's kind of weird down there. I go, okay. I said, did you find my pins by chance? I just want to pull them back. I like to keep them to the surface, so if something did happen, I just, right here and right here, keep everything happy with the neighbors and whatnot. He goes, there's something weird down there. Comes from your guys' surveyor with the White Bear truck and his apprentices. He goes, there's something weird down there. And so it's like everything's documented that there, everywhere. And now everything comes up to this guy that wants to build a bunch of houses that A, our streets can't handle, B, our sewer system's probably not set up for it, C, our water system's not probably set up for it, D, is our gas even enough to handle that? So it's like this, and the lady that used to own Karen Nicole's house always knew she owned that property. We got in a fight right before she sold the house. I'm like, I don't know who's buying the house. Luckily it wasn't Karen Nicole, really nice people. I'm like, it could be a jerk. I said, she goes, well, my property's over here 10 feet. I go, no, I laid everything out. And she goes, oh, I own this here. I'm like, well, you're not pulling your tape measure off of this. So she even knew, and she's owned that house way before, their kids are my age, and they grew up in that house. And she always knew that that end of that road was hers. She'd have dirt, rock delivered, she'd dump it right there. It was her property, she could. So that's kind of my piece about it. Let's just leave it. It's a vacated street back in 77. I can't remember what I did 3 years ago. 77, that's a long time ago. There's my piece about it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. As you know, we are not taking any action tonight. So this was the public hearing for this proposed vacation. Councilmember Walsh.
Well, thank you, Madam. Just a couple of questions. One, we're going to debate this later. I mean, it is a mess. I mean, Nicole called it a whoopsie. I mean, it's a mess. And I'll just say, I mean, I've looked at all the documents many times, and I was at the Planning Commission meeting too, and honestly, the city, the city's pretty clear. We never vacated the land. It was a mistake sent down to the county, but fixed immediately in 1977. As far as the city's concerned, it's not. It's been our street end, and you know we've put in utilities, and there's a fire hydrant over there. Always thinking that we owned it. That's clear. The county, on the other hand, has completely screwed this up and really harmed the property owners. You know. Both Karen and Nicole on one side, and then the Tice family on the other. I mean, they're both property owners at the moment, you know, harmed by this. And I guess I have a question: has the county said anything? I mean, I guess I feel like they're lawyered up, like they're not going to say anything to hurt themselves. But have we heard anything from the county? Did we get any answer on what they say about this mistake? Because I feel like we're in good shape as a city. You know, you can follow the paper trail, and it was not vacated. The land, but how it ends up in the county file 20 years later. Have they got any explanation for that? Have we heard anything from them?
I don't think we have.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, so I'll let Ann respond to that, and also Troy, they've been working more closely on it, but I can say that that's one of the reasons that this is being continued till the 14th of December, because there's clearly some more research that needs to be done on that and the whys. But Ann, I don't know, it's directly to his question related to the county.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, I don't think that the county representative has had a very clear explanation. It's been more with the surveyor's office rather than the recorder of deeds that city staff has had conversations, and simply I believe the note was not to simply rely on an error that was done years ago, even if it was recreated in the maps, that the message was that would not be sufficient enough to demonstrate that there was a vacation of that right of way. You know, it was I don't want to call it a Scrivener's error, but it was a mapping error.
Yeah, and it's fine to say legally not to rely on an error, but the landowners relied on that error in making a huge decision about purchasing and now trying to sell and develop. So there's harm here, and I honestly, the county's going to have to answer for this. This is a county issue, huge. Just something else, just to clarify for folks in the room, the Dillon Street issue. It came up in the Planning Commission too, and I wonder if we can just get some clarification on Dillon. You know, we talk about Dillon a lot in this chamber because you know we have Dillon's ditch and Dillon as it runs, you know, all the way through the city. Dillon and water. So maybe if you can, Paul, if you can just explain for us why Dillon doesn't work as a street and kind of the access we need all throughout the city as it goes through.
Yeah, Councilmember Walsh, members of the council. As far as Dillon Ditch goes, it's a major drainage way throughout the city, including in this area. We have a major drainage facility within that area. There's a right-of-way on the township side. We only have an easement on the city side of the corporate boundary. As far as putting a road in that area, again, we have that major drainage through there. And then obviously for the township to come in and give up their land and whatnot would be obviously a different path we would have to take. And I don't know if Ann wants to.
I just want to clarify for both the council and the mayor, as well as those in the audience, that Dillon Ditch runs along the western portion of the Tice parcel. You can see half of it is dedicated, as Paul said, in the township when that plat was subdivided. The Tice parcel was not part of the Ramalley Park plat, and therefore that 33 feet was not ever dedicated as right-of-way. However, in 1978, I believe a 33-foot easement was granted to the city, and that is when the storm sewer was installed to allow for the Dillon Ditch to drain through the Tice parcel, as well as sanitary sewer and water that runs through the Tice parcel down parallel to Clarence, makes a 90-degree turn, and then serves the Clarence Street right-of-way, as well as providing services to all those residents. So Presumably, Mr. Friend asked a good question, if the water and sewer was sufficient to serve these additional homes. Presumably, it was sized accordingly. Otherwise, I don't think the Tices would have granted an easement for those utilities.
Yeah, and I just think the bigger point on Dillon is not so much negotiations with the township or anything. From a practical matter, we can't put a structure or a road or anything on top of that. We need access to that for water. And that's true all along Dillon's ditch until we hit the Dillon Street over around, what, 5th or 6th, I guess. Yeah, so, thank you.
Member Jones.
Yeah, hot mess is coming to mind. Just a reminder of procedure, we're on a clock. There's the reason why now, okay? Developer brings something to us, we have to react within X amount of time. I haven't gotten any money. Have you, Mr. Edberg? Because I haven't.
We've been paid.
Don't like the accusation, but appreciate it. Comes with the territory. But I mean, it's ironic, if you're a Historical Society member, we just did a presentation of what's in a name on your Ramaley Park neighborhood, on why the names are the names. Florence was actually a guy, just to let you know. But I'm looking at maps, I did the presentation, 1882, 1874. There's a reason you can't find the pins. Where is he? Yeah. Good luck. There's a reason it's 22 feet. There weren't any cars. All right, that was platted over a long, long time ago. But for me personally, I wish we didn't have to deal with the second part, but I just want to let my other council members know we need to fix this with the county saying what it is. Whatever that result, I guess, is what we need to decide on, vacation or not. That is not dependent on whether I am supportive of the future development of that. It's like, let's fix this. And even if it's, I mean, I'll say this, I have to represent the 24,950 of everybody else. I need to fight just as much. If that is our property, we need to fight for that. We need to legally fight for that. That is our job up here. So if you lose that vacation argument of the street, I'm sorry, I'm not saying you would. I don't know. Hot mess. I'm just saying that's our job to fight for that for all of our residents, just like you fight for every single foot of your land, and I appreciate that. So that's what I'm trying to get. We don't have the answers. I'm going to be looking for those answers in the next 2 weeks. I'm sorry that seems kind of like, well, not finishing up. It's nothing easy. So that's just my point on that to the council is like, I want to fix this vacation, but I know there's a clock coming, and I'd rather not have that clock coming. Let's fix this. Let's do what's right for the homeowners. And it's not just because of a mistake. I also would say to council members, we need to look at that. That if there was a mistake made by the county or us or the city, we're the city, whether it's 77, 87, whatever, it doesn't matter. We need to look at that seriously and say, do what's right for what those folks that are living there now and what they believe they purchased. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Bean.
Madam Mayor. So as we were going through all of the public statements, I took down some questions. I don't need the answers to these questions now, but I think they actually would have a bearing at some point. I believe a couple of the speakers mentioned that they bought the property or they paid for the property. Is that true? Did they actually pay for the property? How was the error rediscovered? I know it was discovered, and how was it rediscovered? Is there a legal responsibility to not remove potential access? So there's property, a developer wants to develop something. Do we have a legal responsibility to not remove their access? Or do we have is there a penalty if we were to remove their access? When were the utilities installed? Is the property zoned for the proposed development? And does the county have any legal liability with this?
Okay. All right, well, those are all things we have to get answers. Councilmember Edberg, sorry.
No, it's fine. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Mr. Bean's list was plenty long. I'm curious about timelines, and I would like somebody to explain what are our obligations. I don't want this to come to a last-second kind of conversation. So what do we need to do to have an orderly conversation? There's lots of, so there are different parts, and some of them are connected in whole bunches of different ways. Which ones do we need, which pieces of the decision do we need to make, and in which order, so that we can be intentional about whatever decisions get made?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Edberg, I'm actually going to defer to our city attorney, because I know that in terms of the timeline for December 14th, I think we're at that meeting. Is there opportunity to further continue the action pending more information, or I guess that would be a question to you.
Bill Grist.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As I understand it, so we have obviously two things that are going on, as you mentioned, the zoning application for the development of the Tice parcel, and then this vacation issue that arose as a result of them seeking development of that land. I mean, that's where this came up. I mean, no big surprise there. You don't look at something until something prompts it, and this prompted it. So now you're looking at it. There is we all know about the 60-day clock, and that is ticking on the development side of it. I would argue the 60-day clock does not apply to the vacation side of it. But I have advised the city to consider as though it is, just because it affects land, it affects access to land, and so let's get this done as promptly as we can, as a general kind of guiding principle. I understand the city has extended the 60-day rule.
60.
Yeah, for another 60, and so that should put us sometime in January, was it? So December 14th is not a drop dead, have to make a decision then. My goal is to provide you additional information about, my office did research each of the titles of the properties along here. We just didn't have a chance to pull them all together. So my goal is to put a memo together to explain our findings from a real estate perspective on each of the parcels. I suspect, I mean, that's not going to change the opinions of, I'm sure, of what you heard today, but I want to work to a position where I can give you some advice, from my findings. I think, here's where you're at. One thing I think the council needs to keep in mind is that it's pretty clear that the city made a mistake in 1977. They recorded the wrong document, and they realized it and fixed it with the affidavit, or attempted to fix it, saying, yep, that was an error. Both of those documents are entitled to the properties. I mean, you can search through and both of them pop up. And so my position is that you can't rely on one and just ignore the other. They're both there, and it just shows that, in fact, the council didn't act on this, and it was recorded in error. And so if that's the case, if you're a property owner, in this case the Tices, I mean, there is an issue for the city about, okay, city, you made a mistake. Now you're saying I can't get to my property because of a mistake you made back in 1977. So that's something I would encourage you to keep in mind as well. I haven't fully explored that, but I mean, that is something that has occurred to me in looking at this. As one of the speakers said, and as you know, you have a copy of it, I did get a letter out today. It was a little bit later than I had hoped, but it took a long time to piece all that together, and it'll take more time to piece the rest of it together. But I commit to have that information to you before your next meeting. Again, not with the idea to push to have you make a decision on December 14th, but at least we should be able to take hopefully a big step forward by then.
Perfect, thank you. Councilmember Engstrand, you had anything? Okay. All right, thanks. Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Mr. Gilchrist, when you put this information together, I'm looking forward to that, would you make sure that you put the two issues side by side? What's the implications of the decision on vacation or not vacation? And what does that entitle, not entitle? What options remain available to the council with regard to the development? And my understanding is that that issue has been continued by the Planning Commission, so presumably, at some point,
They'll come back.
they will deal with the development conversation after we settle the vacation conversation? Is that, and then they will make a recommendation, and then the council gets to have more discussion and decision. Have I got that right?
Yes.
So we're looking at, if we make a decision, okay, so we're not going to get the vacation information until the December 14th. There is no planning commission meeting at the end of December.
No,
So the next time that they could act is sometime in end of January to make a decision, if they choose to make a decision at that point in time, and then we might be running into those 60-day et ceteras. So we're likely not, as a council, to not have that coming back with a planning commission recommendation regarding the development until sometime in February, March-ish, depending on exactly how long that takes. Have I got the general timeline correct?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, please.
Madam Mayor and council, what you said makes sense, but I want to put a kind of a big asterisk next to it that I haven't gotten together with staff yet to talk about timing. Because generally speaking, a planning commission has a limited period of time to make the recommendation. And if they fail to make a recommendation within that time, it just comes to the council. And that makes some sense if you think about it. Not saying the planning commission is doing anything wrong here, but you can't have things being approved by default because the planning commission isn't forwarding them to you. So we have to watch those timelines and see where we're at. There is an opportunity for the developer to extend the timeline beyond what the city has available to it. So that might be an option as well that I understand the developer has indicated a willingness to do, but we haven't seen it yet. And so there are some things to be worked out from a timing perspective. But I guess let me leave it with, I will need to get together with staff, talk about the timing of those two issues as you've indicated, and talk about what it makes sense to bring back and when.
So, Madam Mayor, I'll just close by saying I don't want this issue to be resolved by inaction or a failure to act, and therefore we slump into an outcome. This requires using the best information, the best counsel available to come to a decision and not just end up with something by default. So whatever is required on the part of the city to make sure that that happens would be my hope, expectation.
All right, well then we will move on. I know this wasn't the answer you wanted to hear, but with all the legal questions still out there, we have to make sure we have all the information to make a good decision. So I thank you for your comments tonight, and stay tuned. So moving on to land use, 6B, consent, consideration of a planning commission recommendation for approval of a request by Brian Cox for a setback at 2323 Lake Ridge Avenue. Do I have, it's on the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 8 ordinances. First reading of an ordinance to amend the sign code to allow billboards. Oh, Ms. Gainey, you're up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This is a request that was initiated by Division 25 LLC, the developer of the former Landy parcel, where the pillars of White Bear Lake and Lunds and Byerly's are currently located. As you may recall, there was a two-sided or two-faced billboard that Mrs. Landy had on that property for some time. Its condition, it was a static billboard. It was dated, and couple of years ago, at the request of many of the residents of the Pillars, that dated billboard sign was removed from the property. And so this application is seeking to amend the city's sign code to once again reestablish regulations for both static billboards as well as dynamic billboards, as the city had in place back in 2007 when a more detailed and thorough research was completed. The Planning Commission examined this matter for a number of months over the summer and ultimately reached conclusion of recommending approval of the regulations both for static as well as the dynamic billboards. Some of what they looked at was, this map just shows the orange dots are existing billboards in the city, primarily located along the interstate highways that border our south and our western property line or corporate boundaries, as well as one near the Marina Triangle district. It does not reflect the former billboard that was removed from the Lunzenbeyer site in 2019. However, the red dots on this do indicate billboards that are in adjoining jurisdictions in close proximity. So that was one question that the Planning Commission delved into, concluding that many people probably already think that White Bear Lake allows for billboards since we have them within close proximity to our jurisdiction, and opening that opportunity up for property owners as well as the city, because one change that staff made to the application was to include public zoning districts as a possibility for future consideration for revenue streams if the city council at some point in the future is interested in exploring such. Also included in the council packets this evening is a comparison chart from the previous regulations to what is being proposed by the applicant to what staff had recommended and ultimately the Planning Commission had recommended here in the far right column. I think the biggest debate was on the length of the message hold time. As the City Council may recall, back in 2007, when the dynamic billboard regulations were adopted, there was a 20-minute hold time. At that time, there was a lot of concern about motorist safety and distraction of dynamic billboards along the highways. SEH, I believe, or one of the local engineering firms had done a very detailed study for the city of Minnetonka, and that report was shared with the commission this summer, as well as a more recent study completed, I believe, in 2013 or 2014, which demonstrated there was not a difference in distraction of motorists with a 8-second change time for the dynamic billboards. And so happy to share that with the council moving forward as we get to the second reading. But again, tonight is the first reading. I wanted to provide a little bit more information and background on this for the council's consideration. So if there's additional information that staff can provide in advance of the second reading, which would be scheduled for the December 14th meeting as well, we would be happy to do so. But the Planning Commission did forward a unanimous recommendation for approval with those slight modifications as represented on that chart, and happy to answer questions or take any suggestions for additional information to share with the council before you reach a decision.
Thank you, council. Any questions or thoughts for Ms. Kane? Otherwise, we will hear this back on the 14th of December. Thank you. Moving on to 8B, first reading of an ordinance setting the 2022 fee schedule.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is again, as Mayor indicated, first reading. It's scheduled so that you can give final consideration to this at its second reading when you adopt the budget at our December meeting. Just real briefly, I'll highlight what is under each of the categories, and then certainly if there's any questions or some redirection before we present this at the December 14th meeting, that would be helpful. You'll note that we're making a modest increase, a recommendation for our ambulance fees at 3%. Council and staff had considerable conversation about where we're at with our ambulance fees, and we feel fairly confident in where they're at relative to other communities, and so an increase is just basically the 3% to help for some increased operational costs. With Pioneer Manor, we're recommending a 4% increase that would be effective April 1st of 2022. There's been more significant increases in our management contract, and also just to maintain some current operations. So that is included in the recommendation, and certainly we have staff here that can represent any questions that you might have related to Pioneer Manor. For outdoor activity rentals, we are recommending that we increase fees for our non-resident fees. We have a lot of competition for use of those, and so while it isn't a significant increase, it's enough that we want to create more of a differential between those who are residents of our community and those who are not. Court fees, we're simply removing those because we no longer use the rackable courts as had previously been used. The water usage rates, as outlined in the memorandum, we are recommending a quarterly meter replacement fee for the commercial accounts. We've had a discussion with council about that when we looked at adding that on to our project for the water meter replacement program, and discussion about the need to make sure that that would be paid for by our commercial customers. And in the memo, and certainly we can go into that detail tonight or we can wait until the next meeting, describes how and why that fee was based and what we plan to do to credit accounts that had meter replacements and had been paid for by commercial users in more recent years. Let me look here. We also have our sewer rate increases are at 3%, and then our stormwater management infrastructure fees, we are looking at having a $2 per quarter increase for both resident and commercial. And if the council will recall, we had considerable conversation about our stormwater management fees last year. That was when we introduced that infrastructure fee. It was the first time actually last year, and there continue to be considerable costs associated with our surface water management operations. And we had recommended last year something that was more significant than the $5 per quarter, but because it was a first-time fee, there was consensus among council to start with $5, but each year thereafter look at a modest increase, which is why that's highlighted this year at $7. So there's a variety of staff members here to respond to any specific questions you might have, unless you want to hold them until our second reading in December. With that, there's no action being requested.
Councilmember Walsh.
Some fees went down, you didn't even mention them. Why wouldn't you mention the fees that went down? Give us some good news here.
Give something to chew on. There are. And as highlighted in the resolution, there's several fees that every year we tweak some and we take some away that are no longer relevant.
Trash. Good.
Anybody else? Councilmember Edberg.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. So along those lines, I want to point out just 5 things about how the city manages its finances, since I anticipate that that's going to be an ongoing conversation over coming months. We have tangible experience here, and I just want to kind of pull out 5 bullets. Number 1, not all fees go up every year. There are several of these fees that have not been changed in 2, 3, 4, or 5 years because they generate sufficient revenue to pay for the expenses that they are anticipated to pay for. So, yeah, we could increase fees, but so the second point is when we do increase them, it's based on a financial analysis. We look at how much do we have available, what is necessary to appropriately manage resource and make sure that it's available to do the work that's needed. And then if it passes that test, then there's a conversation about what's an appropriate level of increase. Sometimes, in fact, fees go down. And it's more than just eliminating ones that are no longer relevant. The courts are nice, but there's actually examples of, hey, we've achieved efficiencies, or we have not experienced the cost increases that we had historically experienced. We don't need more money. We actually should give our taxpayers a break, or our service users a break. So that's number 3. Number 4, that we actually, when possible, we provide preferential treatment to residents over non-residents. Now, usually that's in the case of the use of particular city facilities. We give preference to the folks who have actually helped pay for those things in the first place. And so when it comes to using them, sometimes, and especially if we need to ration, we try and give preference to our residents. And the last one is, yes, we are adding new fee categories in some cases. In every one that I saw, and maybe I missed one or two, these new categories are addressing needs, and we are the last ones to the party. Everybody else in the metro has been dealing with the same issues, and we have chosen to hold off and use our other resources as long as possible. That's no longer possible, and yet we have an urgent need, particularly for infrastructure. So I just want to kind of lay out, this is the philosophy that our city has used. It's been that way for at least the 12 years that I've been on the council, and I just want to take this as an opportunity to say that's just the way we roll.
And Madam Mayor, if I could add one, it's not a substantive but a process thing. The last thing to say is that we discuss this in work sessions, and you folks don't have the benefit of, and we're not going to redo the complete argument, but like, for instance, the surface water management infrastructure fee that we added, that was the subject of a long debate and a lot of discussion and a lot of staff work. So it may look like we just don't say much and just approve it, but we actually worked really hard on that and had a long discussion and decided to do that. So, and that happens a lot up here with decisions where we don't redo the argument. Maybe we should do some of that argument, but a lot of work went into that. So.
Okay. Anything to add? Please.
Yeah, thank you. Madam Mayor, council members, and so yes, I appreciate there was a lot that was not mentioned in that report, so I appreciate both of you highlighting things that were gone on. I'm just going to use one example that comes to mind without going into that whole fee schedule, but you know that in past years we've had, or more recently, I think it's been 3 or 4 years, we've had to add on a recycling fee, for instance. It's just an example, because the cost, we were actually having to pay for our product to be recycled while the market took a downturn. And we assured council and put that out there that, you know, as long as we are paying for that service and paying to have things recycled for the processing fee, basically, we're going to have to add on a sort of a surcharge. We are now happy to report that the market is flipped, and now we no longer have to pay that. So that's been going to be removed from people's bills next year. And then as that market continues to get more lucrative, hopefully, that will then have an impact on how we adjust our refuse fees. So just as an example to articulate something specific that you were, I think, trying to point out related to how we look at each and every fee related to our operations. And so, important point. Thank you.
Okay. Well, then we will see this on the 14th. It's going to be a long night. Moving on to new business, a resolution canvassing municipal election results.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, there's a memorandum put together by our city clerk, and it's declaring the results of our 2021 general elections for the positions of mayor, council member Ward 2, and council member Ward 4. The city clerk also prepared and put together what the official abstract was provided to us by Ramsey County after the packet was put together, so that's why we're not able to put it out to you until tonight, but that's also there for your review. And we would just ask for approval of the attached resolution, which officially canvasses the votes for our 2021 general election.
Thank you. Councilmember Walsh.
Just a note on the vote, high voter turnout, which is, I think good. I think it's easy to say that participation is good. My quick calculation, 30% turnout in the mayor's race of eligible voters, that's a lot. Looking back at recent competitive mayor's races, 2005 we got to 27%, 2009 15, 2017 18, so 2021 30% high voter turnout. I'll move the resolution while I got the mic.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 9B, resolution approving final design and authorizing the preparation of plans and specifications for the South Shore Boulevard Trail. Mr. Copy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As you are aware,
They're going to talk.
back in February of this year, we council approved a memorandum of understanding with Ramsey County to move forward with a preliminary design and layout for this project, which included redoing or adding a trail with legislative money that the county received from White Bear Avenue to Bel Air within the city of White Bear Lake. That memorandum of understanding also included a turnback of South Shore Boulevard, which would be turned into a one-way through the study process that's occurred over the last several years from McKnight to Bel Air. It also laid out the funding, the project funding with the between the city and the county. So at this time, I'm going to invite up Greg Brown and Joey Lundquist. Greg is with Kimley Horn, who was the consultant that the county hired. Joey Lundquist is a project manager from Ramsey County. They're going to walk us through the corridor and the design work that Kimley Horn did. Kind of just walk us through from where we were at in February with kind of that preliminary, just visual layout to kind of the actual final design and where we're at. And then I also want to mention that also in the council memorandum, there's some information from a resident in the area, Scott Costello, who provided some information on the undergrounding of the power lines through Snyder's Bay. We'll take that after the county presents the project, and Ellen and I will give some further background on that afterwards. So I'll present Greg and Joey to walk us through the project.
Thank you, Paul. You have slides up. Madam Mayor and council members, we'll just try to walk through here briefly. I think hopefully most of you have a pretty good sense of the corridor already from past discussions and just familiarity. So starting from west to east, the project does start at White Bear Avenue. That first kind of half block will be very similar to its current configuration, but we will be adding a trail and a crosswalk connection across White Bear Avenue to the existing trail on the west side of or towards Goose Lake there. Then the main trail kind of tees in there on Old White Bear, and we pick up the trail that's going to run along South Shore along that entire north side of the corridor from essentially this point all the way to County Road F. So a couple changes to note here on the west end. We'll have a curb and gutter that's going to be installed along the northern side of the roadway, and that's going to differentiate between the northern edge of the road and have a green boulevard, turf or grass boulevard. Then the trail, there'll be some separation between the trail and the roadway, which is a little bit different than how the trail relates to the roadway kind of further up to the northwest. So that relationship essentially continues really throughout the corridor. In the western end of the project, we'll also have a curb and gutter on the southern portion of South Shore Boulevard, and that's going to continue just a little bit east of Hazel, and that will then transition. You can see on the southern or the lower view there, that transitions to a shoulder just a little bit east of Lakeview Avenue on the south side. So the typical section from Lakeview Avenue to McKnight is a shoulder / parking space or parking bay on the south side and a 2-lane roadway as the main road, and then the red line is a curb and gutter and grass and trail. This particular section, because we've added the trail, is slightly wider than the existing roadway. So it extends 3 to 4 feet to the north, northerly of the existing asphalt edge, and about 3 or 4 feet to the south. It kind of varies a little bit because the existing roadway edge varies. But that's the general relationship up to McKnight Boulevard or McKnight Street. So the next view here gets us to McKnight, and at that point we transition from a 2-way roadway to a 1-way eastbound roadway. And in that case, both the trail and the road generally exist within the existing footprint of the asphalt roadway. So that's kind of the whole impetus of that, is to mitigate the narrowness and the topography of that part of the roadway. There's very challenging slopes, as everyone knows, and making a 2-way road east of McKnight would have some pretty significant property impacts. So that typical section really continues on through the remainder of White Bear Lake. The image here shows, as we get to Snyder's Bay, we have a small parking bay on the north side of the roadway. And that's been kind of modified and adjusted over the course of discussions with residents and property owners. to its current configuration, which suffices for, I think, everyone in that area's needs, as well as people that have docks that don't live along South Shore Boulevard. Further to the east, as we get towards Bel Air, again, that typical section is the same, but there is some city utility work that's going to take place, primarily sanitary sewer work that's going to be installed in an area that doesn't currently have sanitary sewer. There's a little bit of water main work that will be incorporated with the project as well, and the city is working closely with our county project team to incorporate those improvements in the overall project. There are a number of easements associated with the project, primarily due to driveway matching, just kind of blending grades in as best we can. Also, there are some easements associated with the sanitary sewer work, and I think maybe not for water work in the city, but those easements are being procured by Ramsey County. That process is going quite well. I think we might be down to just a handful of property owners that will be that remain to be signed. The process will, by eminent domain, if it gets to that for any parcel, will be resolved by February 7th, I think. So those notices just went out. But I think based on the progress to date, the expectation is probably no properties will actually get to that point. So that's good news. There's generally been very positive support among the residents in the corridor from my whole experience, if you will, along the project. So that's refreshing and pleasant as a engineer designer, and I think we've met with very significant number of residents and have made quite a few kind of modest refinements to the plan over the course of the summer, and I think that's been well received, and it's been good input, frankly. So I think it's a better design now than where we were here just a few months ago, and that's a product of input from the residents. So that's been a positive experience as well. I think we'll just briefly kind of continue on for the sake of council or for maybe interest, but the project does go into the township. So east of Bel Air, we'll be continuing essentially the same section as we have in that McKnight to Bel Air, one way eastbound, parking on the south or shoulder on the south. There are a couple parking bays right in the vicinity of Bel Air Beach Park, and those have been coordinated with the township, and the township's also planning to do some improvements along the way. Any streets that we intersect, there's a little bit more of this in the township than in the city, but anything that we intersect, we're looking at improving the crosswalks, making the road kind of pinch points at that point. So it's a safer facility to get across to the main trail. Those are improvements that are kind of occurring throughout. The township is actually proposing to replace the entirety of their water main, so that's going to be a significant amount of construction in their segment of the roadway. Similar to the city, that work's being done by the township, incorporated into the plan, so it will appear as one project to the public, but it's a township generated project similar to the city's sewer and water work. The roadway just continues on. I think, Paul, maybe the last slide there shows our connection to County Road F. We're making some improvements to that curve, and the trail that's coming down that hill, you might know that it's quite a steep hill. It's about a 9% grade, and we're getting the trail close to 5 or 6%. So we're flattening that trail out by kind of pulling it a little bit away from the road. So that's a positive embellishment or enhancement that we're able to achieve in the final design. The roadway will stay pretty close to its current grade because of needs to tie into driveways and other intersecting streets. But all in all, where we've had opportunities to do things like that and enhance the experience of the people using the trail, as well as the safety of the cars, we've been able to incorporate a few of those items. So with that, I guess we'll open it up for questions if there's any questions. And
could you go over the schedule just a little bit
Sure.
before we open it up?
So from a design perspective, we're looking at wrapping up plans here this late fall. We mentioned the right-of-way process will be finished no later than February 7th.
Yeah, we were told the date is February 7th that we'll have right-of-way, so we can go out for bids right after that. We need to have the right-of-way in hand.
So we would anticipate, given those dates, to be able to start construction hopefully in early April or mid-April and have next year's construction season as a place to work. We anticipate closing the roadway, except for local traffic, of course, during the entirety of the construction process. There will be some final cost-sharing agreements that will be kind of worked out here as we get to the final details and final quantities. I think, Paul, I'm not sure if that's going to come to council, if that date has been set yet, or...
The next step from a city standpoint, or at least council approval standpoint, will be entering into a cooperative agreement once we have those final costs for the project. As we haven't decided yet if we're going to bring that to council before or after we receive bids. I'll be close with estimates once we get the plans complete, probably early in 2022, or we can wait until after we get actual bids to enter into that. So time will tell over the next month or so when we feel it's most appropriate to bring that to council.
Yeah, Mayor, Council. So, Paul, could you remind Council, because I'm afraid I'll hatch it up if I give the wrong estimate, but we did review with Council earlier on what our estimated cost participation was, probably about a year ago before we entered into this design phase. I believe it was around $350, $400 with all said and done. Is that accurate?
City Manager Heinecker, I'll just kind of briefly go through those costs. So from White Bear Avenue to McKnight through the county's typical roadway cost participation policy, kind of decreased by some of the legislative funding that was received. We're on the hook for about $100,000. We also, as part of that memorandum of understanding and negotiations with the county as far as taking back South Shore Boulevard between McKnight and Bel Air, we're getting a credit for future improvements. So we said we would take that over if they would provide us with funding to do a future mill and overlay. So if you incorporate that into the project, we're on the hook for about $50,000 for roadway improvements. Then the major cost above and beyond that that the city will see is for decorative lighting. That would continue similar to how we have on the last segment along Old White Bear Avenue. So it'd be that similar style of pedestrian lighting that would be along the trail. And that, I believe, was in the neighborhood of about $350.
Yeah,
round numbers.
Just south of 300, I think, is our current number.
So 300 current number. So that brings us to about $350,000. We'll have about $150,000 worth of sanitary sewer work. The majority of that will be assessed back to those benefiting property owners. So the total out of pocket for the city is going to be, like Ellen said, in the neighborhood of $350,000 to $400,000.
I wanted to add, I was just talking with Tom Nash this week, and he said that there would be a cost share on right-of-way for White Bear to McKnight, and I think the total is $128,000, which I think is half the city due to the cost share for right-of-way.
Okay. So we'll have a little bit additional in that right-of-way aspect, but.
All right, any questions?
Question, Madam Mayor.
Please.
How wide is the green space buffer?
It's essentially 6 feet from the curb to the edge of the trail.
That includes the curb,
That does
right?
include the curb, so the curb's 8 inches, so it's 5 foot 4 inches.
Okay.
It's not universal, but that's pretty.
No,
consistent.
right, because you probably know why I'm asking, because it usually winds up dead if it's narrow. You get those 2 feet strips
Yes.
of grass, so that was my curiosity that it's got a better chance to survive.
And we are using a low-maintenance, low-grow grass that we got a grass seed mix from MnDOT that they use.
As long as it didn't come from the U of M or any test grass that's supposed to be supposedly working.
The idea
I get it. No, I understand.
The people there might not want to mow it.
Well, that's just it. I
If
mean,
they don't mow it, it'll still look okay.
right. I mean, some want a golf course out there, some don't. And so I know that the smaller strips tend not to survive very well. So thank you for that.
Councilman Redberg, did you have something?
Yes, Mr. Jones should not knock the University of Minnesota Department of Horticulture reading program.
Well, we can just go out to Highway 61 and see how good a success that was.
So my question would be, in the design phase, how confident are we that the water quality impacts to the lake will be minimized, non-existent?
Improved.
How do we think and what are we doing about that? Good question, Councilmember, and I should have spoke a little bit to this. There's probably two elements of the water, stormwater and water quality, that are really key to the project. One is just management of stormwater. It's a big problem, as maybe a lot of the council members know, on South Shore, and I've learned this over the course of our design. And most of our conversations, frankly, with people have had to do with stormwater. So one of the key design elements of the project, having that curb on the north side, handles that, along with the drainage infrastructure. Will manage water that in most cases, or many cases today, is kind of making its way into people's yards. So that's one element. But the other element is also then, as we manage that water or collect it, we're providing places to filter it and infiltrate it into the ground. We're generally, we're not changing drainage patterns per se. The water ultimately gets to the lake if it doesn't get infiltrated. And we're also sensitive to Lily Pond, which is just to the south of the road, and we've had discussions with both residents there and city staff. And we work closely with city staff on the scope and the placement of water quality features. So we really have kind of a two-pronged approach. I think most people that have issues today with water that's kind of basically coming into their property, mostly on the north side, not so much on the south, that should be largely mitigated, as we were talking earlier, storms are bigger, et cetera, but today there's really nothing stopping it unless someone kind of took it upon themselves, or the city or the county have built some makeshift dikes or berms. But this will be a much more systematic approach to that, and then the fact that we're kind of collecting it allows us to treat water too. So we're treating it to the standards that the city requires, which is actually a little bit more robust than the watershed, as maybe you're familiar with on the council.
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilmember Jones.
So with that, sorry, Madam Mayor, and thank you for asking that question, Councilmember. So the not having a surmountable curb is because direct testament to that. And right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there have been inquiries of, advantages, disadvantages for whatever reasons, but it primarily has been water treatment, whether it's been stormwater or diverting the water to where it can go. Because, Lily Pond is not a man-made pond. That was there. It's been on maps forever and a day, dating back to the 1870s. It's not the typical, let's dig a hole and divert all the water to it. So it should be protected. Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, well, thank you. Appreciate the information. Now I will bring this back. Oh, Mr. Coffey, you had something to add.
The only thing I was going to add quickly is when Greg was talking about water quality, one thing that is kind of a little bit of a perk from the project is the area that we're in a one-way roadway. We're going to be separating that trail from, if we had just a full 20-some foot wide roadway that drains directly to the lake, now we're going to have those buffers adjacent to the trail, so it's going to be filtered and buffered before it gets to the lake. So we're going to have some kind of added benefit from going to that one way through that area.
And Mayor, members of the council, thank you. And outside of the work that's been done by Kimmy Horn, also included in your packet is some information provided by Scott Costello, who is here with us tonight. Scott has been very passionate about this trail and an advocate for it for decades, along with our council member to my left here. It's we always appreciated your enthusiasm for it and have had ideas about different design elements to it. But one most specifically, and that's applicable to, I think, council's deliberation tonight, is a proposal to bury the underground, or to bury the power the power lines that extend in the Schneider Bay area. And I can say that we, at the staff level, we touched on this a bit with council during a work session when we were talking about South Shore Boulevard. We still, despite some of the great arguments that are extended by Mr. Costello, we still, continue with our recommendation to maintain the precedent that had been established by the city, because the cost is not inconsiderable. I think it's about another $400,000 is what we're estimating to do those power lines. And then some concerns about where you start and stop, unless it was just very selected to Schneider Bay, which I think is what Mr. Costello had proposed. But I just wanted to make sure that I highlighted that we did add that to it, and he's been awaiting an opportunity to present that, and so we put it in the packet for council to consider, and just to acknowledge that on behalf of his interest in this project.
Okay, Councilmember Jones.
Madam Mayor, would it be possible to address a question directly to Mr. Costello?
Sure.
Is it all right if he addressed you? Because it's your meeting. Our meeting.
I like Scott.
Our meeting. No, it's just specific because, I'll be honest, his memo changed my mind. And it really surprised me that it did.
That surprises me.
I know, but it's like, when you hear phrases, once in a lifetime, specific areas, you actually walk it, drive it, look at his pictures, look at those telephone poles leaving. I know. But I just want to set the stage of why, because it's like, again, I'm a historical society guy. I'll give a plug to them again. And by the day, we did another program, What's in a Name, Part 2. I know. Well, we actually did this area too, just FYI. So it was fun. No, but we're talking about the gateway. We're talking about the gateway. There should have been no dry eyes. We're talking about a gateway that starts at Old Wiper Avenue and Wiper Avenue and South Shore. I mean, this is where Wiper started. This is it. First school, first frame house, first school, first cemetery. That is it. This is the gateway to this area that I think deserves special attention. Do I want to play the South Side card? Yep, I do. So I'm just playing that, not him, and I want to make sure. So
No,
I just want to know why, specifically, he felt so strongly.
I think he laid it out beautifully in this memo.
But with the precedent thing. That's the tough one.
The precedent is the problem.
That's the tough one, and I'd like to say ask him specifically, okay, why, Scott? Why do you think this precedent thing is not a big deal? If I could you could invite him.
I can do that. Please come up, Scott.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I have to stand back. I got this device here.
Okay.
Get a little bit of feedback. Yeah, I've got a few pictures to answer your question, Councilmember Jones. Next one.
Scott, speak up, please. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay. Maybe I'll have to take this off.
Or just speak louder.
Oh, okay. The city has 3 areas that, where there's open views of the lake. We have Lake Avenue, the Marina area, and Snyder's Bay. And all 3 of these areas, it is the case that the most of the lakeshore property is privately owned, but the roadways, the trails, and most significantly here, the views of the lake, the experience of the lake as people walk, bike, run, motor around these areas are public. And the first 2 have been completed in recent years, and the results have really been outstanding. Speaking for myself, my wife and I spent a lot of time in the Marina area along Lake Avenue. Is really superb. It's one of the things that we really love about living here in White Bear Lake, is these kind of things. But there is a third area in Snyder's Bay that will be developed next year as part of the Lake Links Trail South Shore Boulevard project. And this becomes really our once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something with Snyder's Bay to elevate it to the level of these other two areas. And as we consider investment in Snyder Bay, we want to make sure we don't underestimate the value of these kind of lakeside spaces. Next slide. Just as an example of this, consider the example of Theodore Wirth, was the visionary who developed the Minneapolis park system over a century ago. And it's all based on views of lakes and other water features. And now, 100 years later, this is the heart and soul of the city, something of immeasurable worth. And the neighborhoods that were built up around this ring, it's called the Grand Rounds, have heightened property values. So they contribute much of the city's residential tax base. But it's not just for the people who live there. Everyone in the city uses these spaces. If you walk around any of these lakes on a summer weekend, you see a huge diversity of people. The point is that these lakeview areas are intrinsically valuable, and that with vision, design, and investment, you can create something that will pay huge dividends like 100 years later. Next. So this begs the question, will we have the vision like Theodore Wirth when we are investing in our lakeview areas around our namesake lake? And I think the answer is so far so good. I think we've done a very good job with Lake Avenue. We've done a very good job with the marina. But the next test of vision, our vision test, will come next year with the development of Snyder's Bay. Next. And it will, just like the other two, has value to the entire city. And, but especially to the neighborhood south of the lake. We have a long-term plan for pedestrian sidewalks and trails. And with the completion in the next year of the sidewalk NF and the trail on South Shore Boulevard, it will be largely complete, except for this little piece going through Hidden Hollow. But Snyder's Bay is where this whole system connects to the lake. And thus, investment we put into Snyder's Bay and in the completion of the trail system, that investment will benefit all the neighborhoods south of the lake. When you consider that these neighborhoods are comprised mostly of ramblers and split levels that are 60 years old. And if this area is going to be a desirable place to live 100 years from now, when these houses are 160 years old, it's going to take a huge amount of mostly private investment. And homeowners will make that investment if it's a desirable place to live. And that's where public investment acts as a lever to keep the property values up, to keep the tax base up, and encourage private investment. So, in that sense, these kind of investments really will pay for themselves, I believe, over time. So what kind of investments are we talking about? Next, please.
I can get back there.
See if it get back there. Because I'd like to see that picture, because it sort of demonstrates what we're up against here. It does get down to the issue of the power lines. And when you look at this picture, okay, we're coming up again. There we go. Thank you. Must be something it doesn't like about that. Like what you see here is what it looks like today. And in order to make this as attractive as the other two areas, we need two things. We need to add the decorative lighting, and we need to underground the power lines. And, you can say that, well, you can still see the lake between the power poles, but that kind of misses the point, because the beauty of these kind of areas are about the experience of people walking, running, biking, driving through the space, and that's why it is so important to do. There's two big issues that might prevent us from doing this: precedent and cost. Those are the big ones that we can't hide. In terms of precedent, the other two areas were based on the precedent that the city never pays for undergrounding. In the case of the marina, that was a joint public-private design effort, and the cost of the undergrounding, which is quite important for the public use of that, was actually paid by private interests. And on Lake Avenue, there was a section of a few hundred feet of overhead power lines. The city declined to do that, and some neighbors picked up the cost. So that is the precedent. Now, in the case of Snyder's Bay, there is no private money that's being offered to pay for this. So what we see is that the precedents that help make those other two projects possible will necessarily make the improvement of Snyder's Bay impossible. And this precedent in this situation is really flawed. Because what it's saying the equivalent that there is zero public value in this view. It's saying that it's not even a public view. It's actually a private view owned by the people who live across the street. And if those people can't or won't pay for it, it just can't be done, period, end of story. But as this trail is completed, there will be dozens, maybe hundreds of people moving through this space day after day, year after year, decade after decade. And we would be saying to all these people, well, sorry, it's ugly, but our hands are tied. It's precedent. We can do nothing else. We're saying to everyone who lives south of a lake, well, sorry, you don't get anything as nice as what's on the other side of the lake. But it's a precedent. Nothing we can do about it. We would be saying to the future white Barians of the 22nd century, well, sorry we flunked the vision test back in our day, but it was a precedent. And besides, by the 22nd century, we're all dead anyway, so who cares? I say that we need to set a new precedent, which is entirely within your prerogative as the council to do, a precedent that recognizes the inherent value in these kind of spaces and encourages investment for the future. The other big problem is cost. It's not cheap. You know, it's what, $300,000 to $400,000, somewhere in that. And we don't have a whole lot of choice other than to budget for what Xcel Energy wants to charge. We don't, you know, we can't go out and get a cheaper estimate because they are the monopoly. And some might say, you know, this is just an extravagance that we can't afford. But I say that we need to distinguish between what's an expense in the short term and actual investment in the long term. And you can't get any longer term than this, because once those lines go underground, Xcel will maintain them in that state in perpetuity. They'll be underground next year. They'll be underground 100 years from now, providing, I think, exceptional value despite the cost. And I know that this city has a reputation for being very frugal. We have some of the lowest taxes of any city around. And I have to say, as a homeowner, I really, truly appreciate that frugality. But I also appreciate living in a place that has vision and is willing to invest in that vision in the future. Now, one final point is that some of you might be saying, well, I understand what you're saying, Scott, about the public value of dealing with this, but shouldn't we be assessing something to the people who live across the street for the benefit they might get? It turns out that state law on assessments only allows you to assess for city-owned property, and Xcel's power lines are not city-owned. There is one exception, and that's if the affected property owners, all of them, petition the city saying, we want to pay for it, please assess us. And it's this exception that Mark Sather and I pushed through the legislature in 2005. Mark sat next to me as I testified at 4 separate committee hearings down at the state capitol. We got that bill through. Governor Pawlenty signed it. And we used that on the north side of Joy Avenue to bury the power lines behind our houses. And in that case, it was a private view, not a public view like this. And the neighbors were organized and willing to pay for it. None of those conditions exist on South Shore Boulevard, which is why we need to be more creative to get this done. So ultimately, my request to the council is that you support the vision. One more slide. There we go. Is that, is to support the vision that these areas are intrinsically valuable. We need design and investment to produce long-term benefits to our city. And at the top of the list is getting the dark power lines buried by hook or by crook. So that is my position.
Thank you.
Any questions on that?
Sure.
So in your vision, Scott,
Okay.
where would the undergrounding
Now I
begin?
have to plug in again so I can hear what you're saying.
Sorry about that. where in your vision would the undergrounding begin and end? Does it begin at the top of the hill at the, basically McKnight or a couple of houses down, and then we go underground until the lake goes away from, the South Shore and the lake diverge?
Yeah.
Is that the portion, or is that?
That's what I always conceived to be the areas where it's actually open, which would be 2 houses east of McKnight. And then going down to the first house that starts. I mean, that would make sense to me, because you can see, if you could back up to that previous slide.
I got it.
Not that one, the one after. No, the summary slide, because there's a picture there too. This is the view like right after that second house, where it opens up towards the lake. So you really have, like, what they say, here's a diamond in the rough view.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay,
So, Madam Mayor, if I may?
sure.
So with that, Scott, you dropped an earbud on the floor.
That's city property.
Is it? My request, and I know we went through this in a study session, but I'm like, this, we don't have firm costs, we don't have firm, hey, it's from X to Y. And I do think this is important. This is something different. This is the precedent before. What we're looking at really is just those houses along Lake Avenue that didn't have the road, by the way, between. There was those houses along that Commercial Bay area. So it's, again, a different set. Yeah, I know it's expensive, but Scott, to me, made this point of it's a 100-year journey. And with the windfall, I mean, I sat here 8 years ago and going, I am going to do my best to stay on this council to see that this trail happens, and I don't care if we pay every single dime for it. And then we've got the amazing group with the bike around the lake, trailer around the lake. Amazing with what they did. They got us state money, again, taking part of it out of the left pocket, right? I get it, because we're still going to reach into the right pocket. I'm saying let's do some investment. We are looking at $350,000, $400,000 already to match our existing trail, which we should do we shouldn't cut one corner. And so this I'm not going to, it really, I think it needs to be reassessed. Now, if we want to look at it, I'm certainly not going to vote against this.
Well, that was my question. If we don't approve that, do we have to?
Yeah, that's kind of.
Can we approve this and still look at that?
And know what timelines.
Right, exactly. It's like.
I mean, I got to ask the experts, because I have no idea.
We're kind of at the last hour as we sit.
Okay,
I don't
we've
know if
waited
Greg
too
has
long.
anything to add to that, but we're kind of like, we would need to know now. In order to.
If we were going to say put it in or not, you'd need to know tonight? Okay.
Very soon.
No, we can't do that.
Very soon, we'd have to know that, just from the standpoint of we would have to get Excel on board. Their schedules can be many months out.
Yeah, well, we can't do that.
So if we were to act tonight, there would be a chance we would get it in with the project. I don't know if Greg's probably done some more recent stuff, but if he has anything to add.
Well, I think very soon, is, I'm not sure exactly the definition of that, but absolutely has to be, Excel has a lot of work. We have some coordination work on our end to, for the next council meeting or how that could work out, but it does need to be determined. There is an element to, when the power goes underground, people that are directly served by that power either have to get their power underground, and Scott probably knows all of this, but that needs to be coordinated as well. That might be as much of a logistical thing as other elements. So there's a lot of moving parts. If council's leaning that way or in a head that way, we need to know.
Well, I mean, sorry, Madam Mayor.
Well, I'm waiting to hear if anybody else is, I know where you stand on
No,
this.
I want to be fair to the council, Madam
Yeah.
Mayor, because I would say if this could wait 30 days, and even I know it will be a
doesn't sound
council
like it
turnover.
can.
And if it can't wait 30 days, I can't ask the council that. I mean, they don't
Right.
have the information. It's not a fair question if it can't wait 30 days.
Councilmember Bean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. While I understand that it's not a decision that we can make today, I understand the reasoning behind it, and I would see it as an investment into the city, and sometimes you have to invest. I think I mentioned that earlier. And there would be some payback because the surrounding properties, I believe, would go up in value even more, so there'd be some property tax advantage to that.
Then what do we do when the next neighborhood comes by and says,
But-
put us underground?
I don't believe that there is a similar neighborhood.
Well, it won't have to be. It could just be, I'm playing devil's advocate, it could just be any neighborhood. It could
It's-
be my neighborhood.
Right, this
You
is
know, I could
specifically
say-
for a trail with a view.
Yeah, I don't think so.
How about Old White Bear Avenue about 2 years ago? Those residents wanted, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, those residents wanted the power lines underground. There's a huge Comcast cable thing, I think it's about this thick, right in their view. Goose Lake is right across their view. I mean, those folks really wanted it. There's more precedent here than just this, the lake precedents
Well, that's
here.
what I mean.
You're
I'm
exactly
thinking-
right, Madam Mayor.
I'm
It's-
thinking
it's-
that, you know, and don't get me wrong, I like this idea, but I just think it is a precedent, you open a whole can of worms. I mean, because everybody's going to see how, you know, I mean, I like power lines underground, don't you? I mean, I think we all do.
And I think just make one other point, too. I mean, we keep saying in 100 years. I mean, in 100 years, I hope we're not using power lines like this.
I hope it's all
Seriously, I
dumb
mean,
solar.
I got to believe technology is going to advance.
Gotta be
Or the wind will be doing
Something that we don't know about right now will be in play, and I think we'll be cutting those things down. It'll be a great day, and we'll be figuring it out differently. So
Well,
the problem is the past precedent, not even a future imagined precedent. I can tell you, just was a few years ago on Old White Bear Avenue,
Yeah.
with a bike path, with lights, decorative lights. Actually looks nice, you know, with those lights. So it's the same trail. Just
I
around the
know,
corner.
I mean, it's a hard thing, but, I mean, we did discuss this at a workshop, as I recall.
Yeah.
And I know you've since
Yep,
been
no,
swayed,
and
I
that's
understand
okay.
that, and he makes a very compelling argument. But I'm concerned that we're at the point now where we're ready to pull the plug here and get this thing moving forward, and I really don't want to delay that,
No, I don't want to see it delayed either.
you know, so, yes.
I'm not buying the precedent. I get it. I understand it. Every time we vote on a variance, we risk that. So that's garbage to me. It's what's on each project, and we have the right to say yes or no. So I'm not buying that.
Generally, when we
But
vote on a variance, we're not costing
I
us
can't ask,
$400,000.
right, exactly. And I can't ask the council to go in blind with, staff doesn't have the information that they can't give us today. Although I would have liked to know in a timeline that it's that tight, Paul. That I wouldn't have
Yeah, but
spent
we-
this much time.
but we
knowing-
did
I mean, if
discuss
I don't
it,
have
and it-
30 days, would you guys consider 30 days? And that's okay if you say no, too. I'm not gonna, you know, if it's no, it's no. It's like, no, it's certainly over $300,000. We know that. Yeah, and that's fair, Bill. So
So where do we go then?
we let it die.
Well, no, I
On a
mean,
motion to approve the resolution before us, authorizing preparation of plan specifications for the South Shore Boulevard Trail. I will so move.
I'll second.
all right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'm sorry, Mr. Costello, but it's important to keep this project moving forward. We've been waiting a long time for this. All right, moving on to 9C, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a joint powers agreement with the town of White Bear. Ms. Heinecker.
Members of the council, so speaking of trails, this would be on the other side of the lake. It obviously is related to the trail that would run along Highway 96 on the north side of White Bear Lake. As council recalls, the Lake Links folks were also successful in getting some assistance for a trail to be constructed along 96. I think it's in total $500,000 each for both the township and the city if we were to get a plan and a design that was workable and acceptable to the city in cooperation and coordination with the residents that live along 96, along that corridor. So as part of that discussion, I think it was back in, was it 2019 that we first contracted, I think, with SEH to do a design concept for the south side of that roadway, right, so that it would abut the lake. And at the time, the work that was done was predicated on some right-of-way that wasn't yet totally confirmed yet by MnDOT, the best way to describe it. But it's since there's been a lot of discussion about the territorial road versus prescriptive right-of-way. We can give you a lot of information about that, but let's just say it's a bit messy, just like some other things are that we've been talking about tonight. It's a little messy. Yeah, exactly. It's a hot mess.
There's 2 counties.
So having said that, there has been design work for that south side of 96 that would go alongside the lake. But it does, in fact, in following the prescriptive right-of-way as described by MnDOT and as we also support at the staff, and we've had many conversations with both MnDOT and the county and also with legal staff about how to proceed with that. We do support the prescriptive right-of-way as defined by MnDOT. And having said that, the trail that's been designed that has to date on that south side would be conflicting with private property, that there would have to be either, eminent domain or purchase or whatnot. But it would not be as simple as it has been, and it hasn't been easy even with South Shore. So what we're proposing, and we've talked to the township about this, as well as MnDOT and the county, is that we go into a joint powers agreement with White Bear Township to do similar work for the north side of 96, which would not necessarily be an ideal alignment, but the north side of 96 on the opposite side of the lake, there is right-of-way.
I was just going to add, it would not move the trail to the north side. It would merely move the road to the north side.
Sorry, because we had talked about the trail at one point, but you're right. So if the whole road moved north and we realigned it, we could then accomplish keeping the trail on the south side of 96. Yes, thank you. And in order to do that, we would need to re-engage the services of SEH to kind of continue with the work that they've done and obviously look at the realignment. And the township has agreed, at least at the staff level, to bring this forward to their council. And so depending on the outcome of both elected boards, if the cities goes along and the township board is in agreement, then we would split the cost of this study, which is about, for our part, it'd be about $12,600 for our share of that. So we would first need to give consideration to a joint powers agreement, which is very similar to the one that we had engaged in back in 2019. It's just that we would this time be the principal. At the last joint powers agreement, the township served as the principal. And then the second resolution under a different action then would be approving a contract with SEH for that work. So I guess we would ask council for consideration initially for the joint powers agreement with the township, and if that would be approved by council, then for consideration of an agreement with SEH to proceed with some preliminary design work for a realignment of 96.
Okay, any questions?
Is there enough money in the deal to take $400,000 and put it on the south side?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
No. Madam Mayor and Councilmember Edberg, in actuality, we do suspect that the project, whether it's a realignment, which would be a much more expensive proposition, if that ends up being the option, or even if it is within the prescriptive right-of-way and not realigning the road. Either way, the project is probably going to exceed what we've received from the legislature, so there will be a city participation. But we won't know any of that until we start doing these studies, and we really need, the next step is to be able to work with the neighbors and look at some options. So after we would get this study done with SEH, we would go back to the property owners along 96 and also engage in get some feedback from them as well before it would come back to council.
I'll move approval of the resolution.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah.
Councilmember Edberg.
So these conversations are getting really expensive, and I don't have a picture of where that money's coming from. When you tell me now that it's going to take more than what the state has provided, there's a part of me that says, okay, so when do we start getting frugal? Saying, you know what, you don't want it, blah, blah, blah. It's like, when do we keep that money in our pocket and find some other uses for it?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Edberg, I don't disagree. We don't really have cost estimates for the project yet. We are concerned that the project would cost more than that's been provided by the legislature. So at that point, once we have those numbers, the council will then have to decide whether or not it makes sense to proceed or to go back and ask for additional monies. At this time,
Learn to do without?
or learn to do without. This is not a project that neither the council nor staff had initiated a conversation with the legislature for that funding. It's funding that came to us from the work of the Lake Links folks. And so it's there. And it has to be, we'll have to decide by end of 2024, I think is at the time frame, whether or not we're going to proceed with the project. But currently, we don't have enough information to even make a recommendation on what that cost would be. So this is finishing that work so that the staff can bring forward, here are some options. One's really expensive or not so expensive, and the other one, we could do this, but it's going to impact property owners in this way, and here's how many people are excited about it and not excited about it. And those are the types of, so
We have to look at it.
so that our recommendation is aligned with, we have an opportunity, if the council's interested in ever moving forward with the trail on that side, or the town board, because it would be a joint project, we have an opportunity for some legislative funding to assist with that. But it has not been, unlike South Shore Boulevard, that has been a council priority for many years. This has not been something that either staff nor council has been having a lot of conversation about it until we received some funding from Lake Links and we engaged in that first study as a result of that funding. So this is a continuation to identify what those costs would be and what's possible, I would say.
Okay, any other discussion? Councilmember Jones.
Yeah, I mean, I would support this, but Councilmember Egbert's points are very valid. But it is where the township, to me, in support of it, the difference between this area and South Shore was South Shore had a good length. This isn't very long length, right? I mean, we're really talking about from Ramsey County Beach to the county line, right? We're not talking up to 61 or anything like, as far as developing all that stretch. I just can't believe that there's not some other alternative, even if it's a 6-foot path that's right in the shoulder, that something can't be done. Madam Mayor, I'm turning back to you.
Members of the council, one thing I will add is Washington County also received funding for the portion of the trail east of the county line. So I believe it was $2.5 million that they received. So it is part of a much longer segment of trail.
No, understand that. Thank you. I'm sorry, Madam, but I'm looking at, will that municipality spend it?
Well, that we can, but
Right.
look at
Yeah.
this. The city of White Bear Lake and the township will have done their complete trail.
Right, and that's why I'm supporting.
So I think that's an important consideration. What goes on in Washington County, we have no control over. But, we'll get our trail done.
Call the question, Madam Mayor.
With that, I will. All right, is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the joint powers contract, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have the resolution authorizing the agreement with Short Elliott Hendrickson for the completion of the preliminary design, now, which I happen to think is pretty important. We need to know what that is. Who is that man? So I think this is a key piece that we need. We need to know how much, we need a preliminary design so we can start actually looking at the project.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 9E, resolution approving the 2022 union contract with Local 49 Public Works. Ms. Heinecker.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council. So this is the second to last contract for the year. We have sergeants left, and then we'll be done. But that's going well. So this, just like the ones that we've reviewed with council the past few meetings, this would be a contract for our Local 49, which they represent our public works folks. It would be a 3% increase January 1 with a 1% adjustment mid-year. And again, an explanation to help move that salary scale up a bit. And secondly, it also addresses a position that's already, it's not adding position of lead mechanic, but it's taking, we have 2 mechanics now, and then we had changed some FTE around and reorganized some of our positions. So with 2 mechanics, this would place one of them as the lead mechanic, and that's also addressed in the contract. With that, I guess lastly, I'm sorry, we also have the health benefits, and without going over them again, they are same and similar to those that were provided for other unions and also for our non-bargaining employees. With that, I would recommend approval of the attached resolution.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Move approval.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 9F, rescheduling the public hearing on the issuance of bonds to finance renovation of the public safety facility and the related capital improvement plan. Skinsray, you've waited all patiently all evening.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, as you remember, the council approved Resolution 12870 at the October 26th meeting to call for the public hearing on the intention to issue general obligation capital improvement bonds and adopt a capital improvement plan for 2022 through 2026. State law requires publication of the notice 14 to 28 days before the public hearing in the official newspaper of the city. There was a timeline that was prepared that we had shared that evening that listed the publication date would be November 10th as for the public hearing in the White Bear Press to give notice for the public hearing on November 23rd. However, after recent review of the timeline and we were counting the days, it was noted that there's not a full 14-day notice based on the publication and the delivery of the paper and when the public hearing is on. So to ensure that proper notice is given to all, we're just recommending that the City Council reschedule the public hearing to your December 14th meeting. So we will publish the public hearing notice on November 24th so that we have more than the 14 days. There's no change to any process in the timeline or the related bonding. Approval of this resolution tonight is only to change the date. Therefore, following the public hearing on the 14th of December, we'll begin that reverse referendum 30-day period. That will end on January 14th of 2022. So staff continues to work with the legislatures to get this project and the state's bonding bill for 2022. So we're asking that you approve this resolution so that we can have the public hearing on December 14th.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the consent agenda.
Move approval.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to communications from the city manager. You're on.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, I will keep this brief. I am announcing that there is no work session next week. I'm sure you're all very sad about that. But
They all look broken. We're just
I can
brokenhearted.
tell. Yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to have one. Sorry, it's canceled.
We need a work session.
Actually, there's a good reason for
No, there
it.
is. You're not going to be.
I'm not going to be here. No, we're not having it. We had planned to review the housing study. We want to spend more time with council than just the presentation that would be. We still plan to present to council on the 23rd of November, but the consultants that have been integral in this process are not available that evening. So we will save that presentation where council has an opportunity to really dig in to some of the recommendations for the beginning of 2022. So that is why that's rescheduled, and we just didn't want to fill it in with whatever. So we're going to
Sure you
just
don't want
not.
it on the 14th.
Right.
We don't have much going on that night.
We'll save it the last day. And then also just lastly and importantly, because we are leading up to a pretty significant transition, we have some meetings on the calendar with our mayor-elect and council members-elect to start sharing some of the things that we've been working on and looking at how we transition into the next year. And we also have one of our staff members met with our new manager last week, and I'll be meeting with her this week, and we've been in communication with her, so we're all just really trying to stay in touch and try to make things as smooth as possible, which I know they will be. So great staff, great people. So all that's happening behind the scenes.
Okay, is that it? Anything?
I do not have anything to add.
All right.
And I do not either.
Well, then I guess I can call for a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is done. Thanks.
That was funny. That was a long meeting.